Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is November 26, 2024, and I hope you guys enjoyed our best of season one last night. This is part two of the best of season one, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about. Let's see what I've got here. I've got episode 9, Quantum Jumping and the Mandela Effect with Cynthia Sue Larson, and then episode 12, The Hidden Universe with Anthony Peake. I hope you guys dig this. Episode 11, we're actually going to do tomorrow night, is a very long episode, so we're just going to put that one up and let that one sit up for itself tomorrow night. But for tonight, we're going to do episode 12, The Hidden Universe with Anthony Peake. I hope you guys enjoy our best of season one series here as we're counting down till Christmas and New Year's. I hope everybody's having a great time. Remember, everybody, enjoy this, and we'll be back tomorrow. We're going to listen to episode 11, and we'll talk about episode 11 tomorrow. But until then, I hope you guys enjoy this, and stay tuned. You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings, and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is July 6, 2020. I hope everybody had a great 4th of July weekend. That's in the United States. If you're not in the United States, I hope you had a great weekend. Today, our guest is Cynthia Sue Larson. She is a best-selling author of several books, including Quantum Jumps, Reality Shifts, and High Energy Money. She helps people live more miraculous lives by accessing worlds of possibility. Cynthia has a degree in physics from UC Berkeley, an MBA degree, a Doctor of Divinity, and a second-degree black belt. Cynthia is the founder of Reality Shifters and is president of the International Mandela Effect Conference. Cynthia hosts Living the Quantum Dream on the Dream Visions 7 radio network and has been featured in numerous shows including Gaia, the History Channel, Coast to Coast AM, and BBC. Cynthia reminds us to ask in every situation, how good can it get? And you can subscribe to her free monthly e-zine at realityshifters.com. You can also search Cynthia Sue Larson on YouTube and get her YouTube channel. I recommend going over there and subscribing. We're probably going to have a really good conversation because I have a lot of questions to ask her about the Mandela effect and quantum jumping. It's a new term to me, quantum jumping. I'd actually not heard of this until recently, and we're going to talk to her about some experiences that I have had personally with that. So we're going to bring her on in just a second. Just wanted to remind you that you can find us, Conflict Radio, on all the major podcatchers, Apple iTunes, YouTube, the Conflict Radio Network. Be sure to subscribe to us over there if you haven't already. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get right to it. We'll be right back right after this. Well, welcome back to Conflict Radio. We're with Cynthia Sue Larson. Cynthia, how are you doing today?
Awesome. So glad to be with you today, Conflict.
We are very excited to have you on. I've got some real personal and interesting questions for you that I think the audience is going to love. But I want to get right into what your specialty is. It's the Mandela effect, right?
That's right. Although when I got interested in this topic in the late 1990s, it didn't have that name just yet.
What was it called? What was it called then?
It didn't have a name that I could find at all, actually. I was witnessing just really strange, obvious changes to history and reality. At least that was the appearance of the phenomenon. And I thought, this is in the early days of the internet. I was actually hooked up to a computer that was connected to the system at UC Berkeley. So it was part of the ARPANET in the early days. And people have no idea what that was like unless they were there. It was weird. So like trying to surf the net was nothing like it is now. I mean, not at all. But I did the best I could to see with the research available at UC Berkeley and everything that was available, is there anything to to describe what I'm witnessing, where things are changing, they're appearing, disappearing, transforming, and changes in time, all that stuff. And so I just thought, well, these are like reality shifts. That's what I would call it. So I started a website first with the third age community, and I just called it Reality Shifters. And then once I started doing radio interviews in the late 1990s, one of the broadcast people suggested that I really needed to get something like some name for this and a website. So I just called it Reality Shifters, because to me it was obvious that we're all, even if people don't think they're experiencing this, I believe we actually are all experiencing this. And what it looks and feels a lot like is that reality is shifting. But personally, I think there's something else going on bigger than that.
So what exactly is the Mandela effect, and why are people so fascinated by it?
That's a great question. It's come into people's awareness recently, thanks to the media, TV, newspaper articles, and a lot of people have seen stories about the Berenstain Bears, for example, with it's a commonly known name for a children's book series, and it's so multi-generational that people that grew up with those books are now parents themselves, and they're reading these books to their children. And a lot of people remember that the books used to be spelled differently, that they were Berenstain or Berenstein, but now there's no confusion at all, because it's not either of those spellings with E-I-N. It's just Berenstain. So the Mandela effect, that's one example. There are lots of examples of things that just seem like they've always been a certain way, but it's not what we remember. And collectively, people are remembering that there's just something really different, whether it's the logo of, like Volkswagen now has a little line separating between the V and the W that you'll see on the corporate identity on the vehicle. So it's on all the logos, and it's not a change in the logo. That little line has always been there, but many people, like even I don't remember that line was always there. It used to be the V and the W would all just be one big set of lines, like the V and the W, just like sort of like X's, like there's a big X in the middle. That's what it used to look like, and now it's not like that. So it's the Mandela effect. I'm giving examples because that's usually the way people bumble into this subject. They just feel like, well, wait a minute, something's different. It might come up by a friend asking if they've experienced it. Pretty much everybody under the age of 25 has definitely experienced this or knows what it is. They've recognized that characters like Pikachu, who was just that little cartoon character, and he was, the guy to catch 'em all. That guy, he used to, it's a Pokemon, but he used to have black on his tail, or people remember that, and now he looks different. So it's just all kinds of things. Pretty much anything at all is susceptible to having always been some way very different than what we remember, and that is the Mandela effect.
Now, what do you think is actually going on? Why are we experiencing these changes?
Well, that's a big subject, and I just do my best to take a shot at what's happening and why we're experiencing it. But that's a long-winded way to say that I can't say for sure, because I can't tell you that we absolutely know for sure what's going on. But what seems to make sense to me, because I do have an undergraduate degree in physics from UC Berkeley, and so when I see these changes, I can't help but notice that pretty much everything we're witnessing is what you might call a macroscopic or large-scale example of what we know is happening on the quantum scale. So you could call it the Mandela effect, you could call it the quantum effect also, and just say, well, is it possible that we might literally see a different reality? Because in quantum physics, we know for sure that history, quantum physics forbids a single history. That's what Stephen Hawking pointed out, and he's right. In quantum physics, there are multiple possible histories, and they're all equally possibly true. We also know that the future changes the present and changes the past. That's part of quantum physics. So we would expect to see the kind of phenomenon that we are seeing, but only if it's possible that these phenomenon could happen on this large scale. And we wouldn't see it all the time, but we would expect to see it sometimes. And that is what we're seeing. So to me, it's a good fit, but it doesn't explain why certain things would change in particular, or why some people feel like they see them and others don't, or as far as why does it seem like it's happening much more now, that I would say is possibly just the benefits that we're getting of our improved relationship with technology, like the internet, being able to connect with people around the world. So lots of people could share their experience that they remember. For example, Santa Claus had a workshop at the North Pole. There really was a continent of Antarctica. There was a North Pole. There was snow there. It was a continent. People would remember that. Now there's, and so you can find other people that say, yeah, I remember that. Now, of course, there's just ocean and water up there at the North Pole. No place for Santa's workshop, really. If there was, I mean, it's fictitious, but it's kind of weird. So things like that. On the internet now, you can find other people to say, that's weird. I remember that too. Whereas if you were to ask just before the internet and you just mentioned to random friends and family, chances are most people would look at you like you're nuts. Like, let's look up what it is. And then they would just tell you things are what they are. Like, okay, you remember Thanksgiving is the third Thursday in November. That's what I remember. And now, apparently, it never has been, or maybe it briefly was. But I remember growing up in the 60s and 70s and 80s, Thanksgiving was always the third Thursday. A lot of people do remember that. And the reason we're able to talk about it and the Mandela effect is gaining steam and interest is precisely because of social media like Facebook, Reddit, YouTube, and the internet, that people can start sharing these experiences.
Now, a lot of this, I guess, if I have listeners that used to listen to the old Art Bell show, would know you got to talk to Art Bell, and
Yes.
it was a great show. I remember listening to it. In fact, I just listened to it again the other day. Basically, where I'm going with this is that he announced on air in the 80s that Mandela had died when in fact he wasn't, and it sent pretty much the internet in, or I guess it wasn't the internet, but it sent everybody into a frenzy because he wasn't dead.
Right.
So that's, I guess, that would be a pretty good example of what's going on. Now, if it's multi-dimensional, how many different dimensions do you think that there could be? Is it infinite?
Well, when you go to physics, then it looks like we need at least 10 for a minimum of 10 for physics as we know it to neatly bundle up into a beautiful theory of everything package, so that we've got unity between quantum physics and relativistic physics of the huge, the large astronomical scale physics. So at least 10 dimensions seem like they're required. And that's, there's a lot of esoteric different traditions that will talk about different levels of dimensional consciousness, of dimensional reality. So I don't know exactly what that number is. I don't think anybody knows exactly, but there are some interesting systems that go through different numbers of dimensions. And in my book, Reality Shifts, when consciousness changes the physical world, I describe 10 different dimensions and what it would feel like to experience consciousness at those 10 levels. And it's very similar to what the consciousness author and expert Ken Wilber has also described in his books, like A Brief History of Everything. So it's very, very similar kind of an outlook with just going through just 10 simple levels. But I think it's quite possible there are many more than 10. I think that's just a good starting point, so we can kind of get our human consciousness aware that we're playing with a universe that's much more multidimensional than people realize. And for people that don't know what we're talking about, one way to think about the dimensions is to look at what the configuration of a one-dimensional world would look like compared to a two-dimensional or a three-dimensional. So one dimension would just be like a point that has no measurements at all. It's just like a little point. It's just like when you learn geometry in school, and you might touch your pen or pencil to the paper and make a dot. That's the point that we're talking about. So it's just very simple. When you go to 2 dimensions, you can create something that's got a line. So then it's like a ray of light. It's like a photon. And so, in fact, that's what these are like to me. I think a point is like a photon, sort of, and when it's just a dot. And then the line would be the path that an object might take in a straight line. When you that's 1 dimension, is just going in one line. So it's but then when you get to so I should start over again. I think I incorrectly identified the point. The point would be like 0 dimensions. The line is 1 dimension. When you go to the plane, that's 2 dimensions. It's like an XY axis. So you can kind of tell what you've got by, we're familiar with XYZ axes for 3-dimensional space. And we know what like if you mail a package, you measure its width, its height, and its length. Or if you're fitting some furniture in your space, you need to know those 3 measurements. That's what we're talking about. But in flatland, that would be just the X and the Y axis. That's like a flat piece of paper. And so the dimensional awareness is really interesting because it shows that we are 3-dimensional beings. So it's easy for us to look at this imaginary flatland where we can imagine people are living on a flat piece of paper. We can use a piece of paper and imagine like that's their entire world. It's very flat. And for them, it could seem mysterious if a 3-dimensional object were to go through their little flat world. Anything would look strange, like whether it's a Coca-Cola bottle or a rose or pencil or what have you. Anything that moves through could start mysteriously changing shapes on that piece of paper. So as a Coca-Cola bottle goes through, it would either look like a circle or an oval, depending on the angle that it's tilted at when it's going through that plane. But as you move it through that flatland plane, the residents of flatland would notice, like, whoa, it came out of nowhere. Suddenly we either have this circle or this oval. And now look, it's changing shapes. It's getting much bigger. Now it's getting smaller. Now it's getting bigger. And then it vanishes as the Coca-Cola bottle goes through the page, the flatland plane of existence. So it's good to look at that, because then we can start recognizing what would it look like if higher dimensional objects and events are interacting with us in our 3-dimensional XYZ plane of experience. We also have time. So technically, because we move through an experience of time, you can consider that a 4th dimension. And that's why we have the phrase space-time, which is also worthy of acknowledging.
Well, that's different. That's different than our own time, because time itself is a human construct, isn't it?
Well, time is interesting in itself. You're right, because there is no such thing as objective time. It's very dependent on location and subjective experience. And that's one thing that we found out with relativity, is that there really is a difference in the way someone would experience time based on their location, and there's a gravitational effect as well. So when we're on like at the sea level on Earth, you're going to have a different experience of time. Going slower, it's going to go more slowly. You'll have things are just moving slower than if you're up high on top of Mount Everest, where there's a noticeable difference in time at that elevation. And if you go up higher and leave the surface of the Earth entirely, you start breaking free of this gravitational well that kind of makes space-time kind of heavy and slow, right around anything large like the sun or the Earth.
Well, I have a feeling that there's many more than 10 different ones, and let me tell you a story. And this is the reason why I actually got you on the show, because I really wanted to talk about this. In fact, it's the reason why I created my entire podcast to begin with, and I'll explain to you what happened really quick. I went to bed one night, and I thought I was in a dream, but it wasn't. I'm telling you, I don't think this was a dream, and I'll tell you what happened. I got stuck in between, I was in between dimensions, and I was going to dimension after dimension after dimension trying to find the correct one that I was in. And every time I'd go to one, I'd either run into myself or I'd run into somebody that I knew that I knew it wasn't right. And there were a few where I ran into myself and I was a real jerk. Like I was like, wow, I'm really a jerk here. I got to get out of here. And then I would go back to what was the in between. And it seemed like I was doing this forever. And I couldn't figure out how to get back to this dimension, the one that where everything was right, that I knew was right. And somebody had come up to me and said, "Look, you're quantum jumping. This is how you get back. And when you get back, come find me. I'm a researcher at Cornell, and talk to me and we'll talk about your experience." And I got back and I woke, and I'd be honest with you, I'd never heard of quantum jumping before. I had no idea what it was, and I woke up and I'm like, quantum jumping, this is what happened, and I wrote down everything that had happened, and then I started researching it, and I never before had put quantum jumping into the same category as the Mandela effect until I ran across your book, Quantum Jumping,
Yes.
and then I started looking into your book and what the Mandela effect was. I obviously had heard of that before. And then I said, well, that makes perfect sense. That's exactly what I was doing. I was literally but I was stuck. I couldn't find my way back to this one. It's like I was in an in-between. Like, if that does that make any sense to you at all, or do you
Oh,
think I was just
yes. Yeah, it
dreaming?
totally makes sense. And it's amazing because it fits in some of the experiences that people who've had near-death experiences have felt like they're in this beautiful in-between. Is beautiful because they might have been about to die of, for example, cancer that the doctors can't cure. That would be like Anita Moorjani. She wrote a book, Dying to Be Me, and she describes an in-between place. And in her in-between, she didn't have quite, I mean, everybody's experience is unique. So it's like you can't always guarantee that someone would have your experience or Anita's experience. But what I think is fascinating is it's that same sensation of like all these possibilities are equally possible. I also, I described it in my fiction book, Karen Kimball and the Dreamweaver's Web, where a young girl goes into like an in-between and she can see all these realities. So this is a very powerful experience for a human to have. It's an exceptional human experience,
You
and
know,
it's transformative. So
it's
anyone that goes through an experience where you're in that in between, whatever the reason, whether it's like a dream like you had, or a near-death experience, or however they may get there, I would posit, and it seems likely true, that in most cases people would come out of it transformed. Like you can't go back to the way life was before, I would imagine. I don't know, but that's what I would guess.
it seemed like I was stuck there forever. Like it had to, like years and years and years. I was trying to figure out how to get back to my right dimension, and finally this guy that was there, he told me, he said this is how you get back to yours, and when you do get back, come find me at Cornell. And I'll tell you, I woke right up, and I come out to the computer, and I searched the crap out of Cornell. I was never been able to find this guy. So if you ever run across anybody at Cornell that's into this, be like, oh, I know somebody who's looking
Right.
for you.
I'll let you know. Yeah. What's so interesting is I've met my future self, but what happens with these experiences is, and I just gave a talk about this very thing at our most recent International Mandela Effect conference. I was talking about the way that possible future selves can interact with our present or past selves, and that I actually have interacted with my future self, I think, on many occasions. But what we often get is it's a different future self than the one we actually end up embodying, because we've already changed our own life that way. It's a very interesting interplay dynamic. So what I'm saying, long story short, we may or may not ever find that particular Cornell researcher. he may or may not remember that ever was the case. But that's irrelevant because obviously that actually did happen in a reality. And you really did interact with that Cornell researcher, even if, I don't know if you remember his name, but.
No, no, and he never even told me his name. Or at least not that I remember.
Right. And I also know that I've helped people who are stuck in, often I'll be dreaming and I'll just experience someone else in a nightmare loop, like they keep getting killed like a woman going down into a dark basement where her car is, and the lights come on with motion detection as she goes down the stairs. She uses her remote key to access her car. Just as the door's opening, someone jumps her from behind and strangles her, or something like that. And it's a dream, and I'm just helping this person, like, wake up, that's a dream, wake up, you can change this. So it's like it's not even my dream, but I'll be helping someone, like, hey, you don't have to do this. And sometimes when I wake up, I wonder, was that really a dream, or did I actually really help someone in for real? You got a weird feeling about going down these stairs. Why don't you just not go down these stairs right now? Let's just not do this right now. It's sort of like, you've got a bad feeling, let's not do it. And I think it brings up another interesting. Well, there's so many interesting aspects to your experience, because what I'm saying is that's real. You know how when you dreamt it, it felt real, right?
Yeah,
like it was realer than real. Yeah. Because some people listening might not quite grasp. I think your audience would grasp that, but anyone coming in off just encountering us for the first time might think we're just talking about some dream. No, when you have a dream like this, number one, you can feel this is realer than real, and when you get that sense, like, wow, this is going on for years, it feels like that's literally true. It's like you're looping. It's like you're just trying everything you can to get out. And I think as humans, in order to evolve, we actually do require a little bit of a crisis like that in order to raise our consciousness to an awareness that we wouldn't have otherwise. So not that it's always necessarily a good thing to go through that kind of trauma. Like, it was a difficult experience that you went through, but I think it was really powerful because you were able to, first of all, recognize this doesn't feel right, and you didn't settle for any of the lesser realities. Did you get a sense at some point that if you had settled, you'd be in a weird reality?
There were a few realities that I was actually told, like you need to get out of here. Like I would run into myself, and myself would be like, yeah, you this is mine. You got to go. This is mine. This isn't,
Interesting.
and I ran into myself a few times, and like I said, there were a few where I was a real jerk. I was like, I'm thinking, wow, what a jerk that guy is. Like, he was so mean and nasty.
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I know.
And there were some that everything was wrong. I wasn't in the right place. I wasn't in the right, even in the right timeline sometimes.
Right. And this is the reason I like to call it a quantum effect, or quantum jumps, reality shifts, as well as Mandela effect. These are all connected, as you correctly noticed, because the reality shifts that a lot of people first noticed. I just recently, this last week, found out that there's a term called jot, just one of those things that has been studied by researchers in England and Australia, and it was known as jot or jottles, JOTT, just one of those things. But they were looking at a very tiny little subset of reality shifts that although some of them are spectacular, where things would appear, disappear, transform, and transport. And that was pretty much it. Then they would look at things that just come in out of nowhere, and like a travel alarm clock that was completely different, or a letter would arrive that didn't belong to a person, and it arrived on her lap when she's taking a nap. And these stories would go back to the 1950s. What I love about all this is that they have the Society for Psychical Research, SPR, in England. And this author that I'm describing her book, Jot, that's Mary Rose Barrington. And now she's passed on, but there's a living researcher in Sydney, Australia, named Tony Jinks, and he wrote a book, Disappearing Object Phenomenon, the same subset of tedious, very kind of boring personal Mandela effects. But it's very important because these are very bona fide. He's a psychologist. He's a professor at the Western University in Australia, there in Sydney. And what's extraordinary and meaningful is he's finding that people that experience these things absolutely have no difference psychologically than those who say they do not. And this is very profound. It means that experiencers are not spacing out, hallucinating, confabulating, just doing, having confirmation bias, all these things that a lot of psychologists and mainstream media currently is tending to put down Mandela effect experiencers and say, like, well, obviously you're confused, or that was just a dream, or whatever. But I'm bringing up this research because I'm really happy to see it right now, especially here we are in 2020. I think we're hitting a tipping point where more people are experiencing this Mandela effect. So people listening to your experience for the first time, I think, in human history, outside of perhaps shamanic times where people would believe dreams, people can actually listen to what you're saying and think, wow, I think this really did happen to conflict. And this is mind-blowing. It's like they're going to believe you. And I'm so glad. I believe you. To me, this really sounds exactly like the kind of experiences that I and thousands of others have had that have been writing to me for over 20 years. So I have the benefit of being the hub of the central recipient of all these firsthand reports. And I've noticed over the last 20 plus years that people are starting to come into a comfort zone with this topic, even though it's a mind-blowing topic, really mind-blowing.
So let's just say, for instance, that I was doing that, and I think I was, but for all the doubters and everybody, let's just say that I was, just for the sake of what the Mandela effect is. That would perfectly explain what the Mandela effect is. Like, let's just say, for instance, I did come back to this one, and I got it so close, except for the Bernstein Bears. So let's just use that as an example. I got it. It was so close. The only things off is that. Now I was able to do that as one person. The Mandela effect is more like it's a lot of people. So how would a lot of people be able to do that at one time?
Right. This gets into the fact that we're social animals, and it gets into the idea of what is me, what am I, and we assume that we know. The truth is not so not as simple as we might have thought it was. You're not just your body is number one. You're so much more. A lot of people don't realize that we have this sort of an infinite nature to ourselves, that sometimes people actually do remember a moment when they are sure they should or would have died, and the next thing they knew, their big Mandela effect, their personal Mandela effect, reality shift, quantum jump, whatever, is that they're suddenly completely clear of whatever that cause of death would have been in that moment. Either they've teleported through it, or they've quantum tunneled through it. Again, to me, I see these quantum phenomena. It's like, wow. Or they've just jumped to another reality that's adjacent. So what was happening is not happening anymore. So it's kind of like a completely different, it's like a scene splice. Like someone took a movie editing toolkit and just spliced right there, like scene change. So it's and the reason for this that I would say is definitely associated with it. We don't know exactly how the cause, what the cause is exactly, and that's precisely because we don't know who we are. This is really absolutely the core of the issue. When I say I, what do I mean by I? I know that I'm bigger than my body. I also know that I've got, I think with my brain circuitry, the neurons in my brain, but I also have neurons in my heart. Now we're finding that our gut, our stomach, is actually a brain as well. And this really does correlate nicely with the way that a lot of mystery school teachers, shamans of old, Tibetan Buddhist masters, and so forth, have known for centuries, actually thousands of years, that we have consciousness distributed throughout our bodies, but also beyond our bodies. So that means if you're dreaming, for example, you can have a true dream. You can do what shamans do and work with energy in that astral dream realm and make changes there that have physical effects when you wake up again or come out of that trance. So this idea that collectively we're experiencing Mandela effects, but the truth is no two people usually ever agree on all of the Mandela effects. Like some people might agree with the Berenstein Bears one, like, okay, that changed. But then they might say, I personally am not aware of a change in the color of the stoplights. Like some people say it used to be green, yellow, red in the United States on the top, green first, and they remember it was that way. Other people don't. I actually did remember a time when I was confused and that switched, and I was like, when did that happen? But it was before I was really tracking reality shifts and the Mandela effect. I just thought, what the heck? Did they just change all the lights? And then I just kind of what they call took the download. That's a phrase that some of the Mandela effect community use to indicate you kind of know what it's supposed to be. You know what everyone thinks it's always been, even though you remember it differently. So it's fascinating because this idea of what about the collective, what
I
about the
lost you there
individual?
for a little. You're kind of away from the mic, or
Okay,
there we go.
sorry.
You're back.
Okay, yeah. So thank you. Yeah, the collective is the part of all of our consciousness working together. So then it's a we. There's like a sense of cosmic connectedness. We have a shared awareness and we have a shared creative quality. Just as those of us who believe in God or a creator, those people would say, like, yes, if you look at the ultimate collective, that would be God. And physicists often need to get into that topic as well when they look at the observer with quantum mechanics, because quantum mechanics seems to absolutely require observation when we look at the wave function collapse and so forth. So the observer plays a pivotal role. And we're noticing with the Mandela effect that communities of people might be establishing sort of a collective consensus reality, which we more or less agree on. But each of us, we can have subgroups of smaller groups of people and then individuals that absolutely have very unique experiences that are quite different than that collective. And this is normal. I think it's the way nature works. I think it's very big. It looks to me like every place, if we take that idea and apply it to, for example, biology, you can see how quantum biology is playing out, which allows for evolutionary leaps where we can't find the missing link between a species. It just suddenly evolved to be perfectly adapted to the new environment. And that happens again and again and again. In fact, that's the norm, is these evolutionary quantum jumps are normal. So I believe we're going to start recognizing that this is a quite natural phenomenon that we're all experiencing. And then going back to your question, individuals sometimes can experience really different realities than what the collective is experiencing. And this is very much part of it. It's normal. It's natural.
Oh, that's really neat. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this question. Now, let's just say, for instance, we'll go back to my experience. I was trying to get into realities where there was another me there. Now, would I be able to, let's just say, for instance, that there was another me in another reality that was also in the in-between with me? Could we then trade out our physical bodies and experience our different dimensions, and then after a week or so switch back?
That's probably entirely possible. As long as they're similar enough, then it won't be too shocking. I think there's a reason that most of us don't experience huge changes like that unless we have what they call multiple personality disorder, which I don't think is a disorder. I talked on this, also was covered in my presentation, which will be on YouTube pretty soon on the YouTube channel International Mandela Effect Conference, because we're now seeing celebrities coming forth and saying the reason that I'm able to be a star businessman and a star athlete Here's my secret. I've been treated by psychologists for multiple personality disorder, but I'm going above the disorder and I'm making the most of it. It's called dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality disorder. And what's interesting about these so-called, I don't want to call it a disorder anymore. Now that I've said that, I'm going to switch out of it.
Yeah,
So,
that's really
okay,
neat.
let's
I never
forget the
even.
disorder.
Yeah.
Well, in the past, we've seen people that claimed that they were afflicted by this. Um, I believe we're now at a golden age of quantum jumping where no longer do we need to call this a disorder, but instead, like the athlete who can become a star businessman and be a multimillionaire and excel at whatever he puts his mind to. Yes, absolutely. The answer to your question is yes, we could do that. And by working with this kind of symphony of selves, that's a new book coming out this year, 2020, by the author Jordan Gruber. And he's working in conjunction with a psychologist. So that book is Your Symphony of Selves. And it really brings back to prominence a theory that is actually quite old. It's not brand new at all. That instead of thinking of ourselves as just one fixed personality, that's not true at all. And it's always been the case that we have had a multitude and access to this. So by giving ourselves, like you are, awareness, hey, I could do this, you're opening the keys to this quantum jumping castle, and that we are each sovereign citizens. We are all from this kingdom of quantum jumping, and this it's really our birthright to do this. I believe in doing it always with the idea in mind for the best for all concerned. And the reason I do that is because there can be a price that we pay if we try to be a zero-sum game winner. I don't believe in a zero-sum game. I think we need to always be cognizant that there are others involved. And just like you noticed, wow, I was a jerk. It's very easy for humans to become jerks and to develop pride and think that you might know, for example, what's best for everyone. That's a very, very dangerous path to go. It's always best to recognize, nope, I pretty much can't know what everyone else wants. I'm going to respect others. And the way I do that, I'm very spiritual, so I would just start each day by saying that I'm living for what's best for all concerned, and I'd like to dedicate my life today to being in service with God, and that sets my pride right aside, right from the start. Because boys, it's amazing how quickly that can cause trouble. I've noticed it, and I think a lot of people have noticed it.
Yeah. Do you think that like our different selves in the different dimensions are of the same soul, or are they of different souls?
That's a really good question. I think they're having different fragmentary experiences. Obviously, like I don't know about you, but if I'm looking at a jerk version of myself, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to claim that. I don't know. I had a question for you too, Conflict, because I was. Do you mind if I ask you a question?
No, go ahead.
When you describe this experience, that in between, one thing when I get, because I've been collecting these firsthand reports for decades, what I would ask you is when did that happen? Like what was going on in the context of your life, if you remember? Maybe your age, generally speaking, but more importantly, what was on your mind? What was in your heart? What was the?
It wasn't that long ago. It was right at the start of our lockdown. It wasn't that long ago at all.
Okay, so
It
it's
it
very
was
recent,
it was
2020.
yeah, probably February or March of this year. It
Okay,
you
okay. And did anything in particular that you're aware of precipitate that? Was there something that occurred or
know.
some?
No, that's exactly it. I've been studying. I did have pneumonia real bad and was admitted to the hospital. I guess it'll be a year ago, probably in September or October. It was a year ago, just in a few months where it didn't. I was actually it almost went septic
Right.
and got really bad, and I don't know if maybe that had something to do with it. Because I kind of had a I guess a spiritual awakening at that
Yes.
point. Trying to do more good, trying to be more right. I guess since then, but I don't know. I think maybe some people are calling this the time of the Great Awakening.
Yes.
And maybe I'm just tuned. I tuned into maybe the energy of the earth is kind of
Yes.
changing.
And this was another talk given at the conference that Evan Maitreya, Moneybag 73 on YouTube. He gave a talk talking about this time of Great Awakening, and really just that there is something happening on a cosmic scale. I would say that's also what I'm observing. I think some of us were there early on. I'm sure I even knew I had that very strong feeling in the 1990s when I woke up early that's what I was there to do, was to kind of like be there so that when others started noticing like, whoa, things are strange, I'd be there already. And I'd be able to say, yep, I can validate that for you. Yep, that's true. You're having a real experience. And that was a lot of the value I was providing in the 90s and early 2000s. And then like talking with Art Bell, and so forth. So it helps, because then the people that are waking up now, if you don't have that kind of, if you don't have any basis to establish a new sense of fundamental reality, this can be disorienting, very disturbing even.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out how I was able to even initiate that to try to do it again. Now that I know how to get back, thanks to the guy at Cornell. But I haven't been able to. I don't know if maybe obviously I was sleeping, but that's more like I was just in a really relaxed state, because you don't have to be sleeping to quantum jump, right?
That's right. It's good to be in a relaxed daydream-like state. So kind of like if it's a meditative kind of practice where you can practice when you're falling asleep each night, when you're waking up each morning. Instead of rushing around when you wake up, just stay in that in-between state where on days when you're able to. Sometimes you have to get up and do something. But
Yeah.
if you're able to just maintain that kind of dream, like I'm dreaming, but I'm awake in the dream. And that's the goal, is to become lucid, to kind of experience, for example, that you're dreaming, but you're dreaming. And when you can bring that awareness into your waking life, this is what I describe in my book, Reality Shifts, then you can engage with reality in a very different way. It's very much like you're living a waking dream. It is a spiritual practice, I see, because it requires that you uphold your highest level of ethics. Because, just think about it. If whatever you're thinking about is manifesting, then it's a responsibility, actually. This is no longer the time to be childish and petty in any way. In fact, it's very important to be forgiving, and to, even if you don't understand why something happened or someone did something, just to start off by forgiving. Just know that they're dealing with divine source directly. It's not your job to do that. Let go of it. And so that can be really hard, but it's very important, because the thing is, all of these reality shifts that I've noticed are driven by the subconscious. So I'll just give an example. And this actually did happen. I was offended by a certain musician who was singing a song, and I thought it was derogatory toward women, and I really didn't like it. It was Mustang Sally is the song, and it was the way he was singing it, and I thought, he doesn't like women. And then I didn't like him, and I knew better. I know, don't think anything bad, don't feel anything bad about anyone, but oops. I was very upset with him, and he developed a case of laryngitis. He totally lost his voice for like weeks. And then I realized, oh gosh, I think I had something to do with this. And I know people might be listening and thinking that's coincidence. Yeah, you could say that. But the thing is, I've seen this just so many times that for me personally, I just took it to be, I need to be forgiving about everything and not judge anyone for anything, no matter what. Because what happens when we develop this gift of quantum jumping is I'll start experiencing these realities. And the best realities that I've found are the ones that are best for everyone concerned. It's really a how good can it get for all of us reality. And that means not knowing, like, I can't speak for you. You have to be able to get the reality that feels right for you. I have to trust the universe and all of the other humans to do their best without judging, getting upset with them as they mess it up. I've messed it up. This is the challenging part of it, really.
Yeah. Are some people more able to do this than others?
Yes, I think. Well, for one
And
thing,
and,
like
and
you said,
why?
we're in a
Why would
time.
that be?
What?
And why would that be? Why would it be different for?
Okay. Some people, like if you look at the Dalai Lama, and that's a historical tradition of reincarnation. So the new Dalai Lama is selected because they can find the child that remembers the objects and remembers the familiar other Buddhists and so forth. So that idea of reincarnation, that's a good idea. So that's part of this process of why some are really good at it. They've basically been working on it for lifetimes. So it's like choosing through every possible experience of living. Each time you live, you're choosing again. I would like to live in the most enlightened way. So just making that choice for yourself. And as you consistently do that, you actually do gain skill sets that do stay with you. It's pretty much, I think I can't remember where I heard it, but they say whatever you forget is what you get to bring with you. So it's like whatever you remember, no matter what, like even when you're pushed to the limit and you have a tendency to have your buttons pushed and fall back to old patterns. Whatever you fall back to, that's what you bring with you to the next life. So you want your fallback to be your best game. You want to be your most forgiving, your most enlightened, your best. And so those people do have an advantage. The ones that have been doing that, and then they come in. And I've been doing that to some degree. I'm not like the Dalai Lama, but I think in my case, I'm definitely making that choice in that direction. Like I definitely want to be doing that. I think there are a lot of us right now on the planet doing this, and different people are doing different levels of it. So that's one way. Other people that are good at this are people who are raised in a shamanic tradition. They grew up being they were chosen to be the shaman for their village, and then they got the training and the tutelage and so forth. They're going to be good at this. Other ones who are good at this are advanced martial artists who are doing internal ki work, working with the yin and the yang or and yang energy, and learning to bring that into their body and become one with mind, body, spirit awareness. I do martial arts. I'm aware that there's a connection there, so I love it. So there's a definite advantage if you do Tai Chi, yoga. Those people will have an advantage. Other people that have a definite advantage in this would be lucid dreamers, people that have been exploring how to wake up inside their dreams. There's more groups of people that have an advantage, and that would include people that do lots of meditation, like hours every day. They definitely have an advantage. Also, people that have near-death experiences have an advantage. Also, UFO experiencers. Pretty much any experiencer of EHE, exceptional human experience, will definitely have an advantage. You have an advantage because of that exceptional human experience you had earlier this year.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's one of those, you're waking up, but you're waking up and you just know, like, oh, that was not a dream. There's no way that I dreamt that, and I actually doing the research on it and seeing, oh well, you were quantum jumping, and then researching quantum jumping and reading exactly what it was. It was like, oh my god, this is exactly what I was doing. It's exactly what I was doing.
And that verifies that it wasn't just a dream,
Yeah,
because
because I
you're
actually
learning
spoke to
something that there's,
somebody else.
yeah. Yeah, no one told you that. It didn't come in. It's not like you were watching YouTube videos about it. No friends were talking about it. It wasn't on TV.
Yeah, well, that's you always have the skeptic. It's,
I
oh,
know.
you must have heard it at some point, and it was buried in your subconscious, and blah 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 blah. And I'm thinking, no, like, no, I'm pretty good at remembering things. I think I would have remembered hearing about something like that.
Right. Yeah, this subject came up last night on the Rip and Rabbit Hole radio show. It was the Mandela Monthly, and Moneybag 73 that I've spoken of. He was on the show with a scientist, Dr. Elizabeth, and I can't remember her last name, but she's the one that gets quoted all the time anytime Mandela effect comes up, and they say, well, it's just confabulation. And so in this particular program, it was a very interesting program. I called into the show because I had just found these researchers that I mentioned earlier, Mary Rose Barrington and Tony Jinks, the professor of psychology in Australia. So that was the reason I phoned in. But I got on the show after their guest had left. That was Dr. Elizabeth. I'm so sorry, I can't remember her name. Oh, Loftus. That's it. Loftus. So if you see in like any newspaper or magazine article right now where they try to do a balanced job of describing the Mandela effect, 9 times out of 10, it seems lately, they're mentioning Dr. Elizabeth Loftus has said that we can see that confirmation bias, there's a psychological factor involved where people will think that they have seen a Mandela effect, but actually they were influenced by something that they've previously seen or heard. So it was really good to have her on the show with Mandela affected people. That was Evan from the Moneybag 73 YouTube channel, speaking with a magician in Las Vegas. That's AJ, and he is the Rippin' Rabbit. He runs that radio show. It's quite good. Mm-hmm. So when I loved that, because when you've got a professional magician, which AJ is, talking with a psychology expert, Dr. Loftus, and then she's basically they didn't put her on the spot. They were very respectful. A lot of the people in the YouTube chat were suggesting, ask her this, ask her that, see if she's Mandela affected. But they didn't push it. They just gently came around and eventually mentioned that some people remember, for example, in the movie The Wizard of Oz, that when the witch has those flying monkeys, there's something that she says in the movie. And this is the coolest. I'm getting goosebumps right now. The coolest part of that show last night was where Dr. Loftus was actually saying she agreed. It's fly, my pretties, fly. And Evan Moneybag said, that's right. That's what a lot of us remember. And now she never says that. Never. And Dr. Loftus is like, what? Because this is a perfect example of a Mandela effect. It's like, okay, many of us do remember a different reality. And why would that be? Moneybags has been tracking
So she doesn't say that in the movie?
No.
Well, in no place. No, I remember that too.
Right. See? Yeah, me too. And they got her with another one. Okay, here's another good one. You remember the old show where they would say, good night, Grace, good night, Gracie, at the end? It was the guy that smoked the cigar, George Burns and Gracie. It's a very old TV show.
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
I'm not familiar.
It's before my time. But the point is, he would say at the end of every show, "Good night, Gracie," and then there was something she always said. And again, Dr. Loftus said, because they were AJ and Evan were asking Dr. Loftus, what do you think she said? And she said, "Good night, Gracie." It was kind of funny. She'd say, "Good night, Gracie," because he would say good night, Gracie. That's what George would say to Gracie.
Yeah.
And the joke was, every single time, a lot of us remember that Gracie would always hilariously say, "Good night, Gracie," even though, what he was saying is say good night, Gracie. You get the point.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, so that's what Dr. Loftus said. She said, "Good night, Gracie." And that is never the case. So everybody that remembers that show remembers it that way. And they got her on 2 of those. So you can actually hear that program, the Rippin' Rabbit Hole show, last night. So that would be the, July 6th.
See,
I guess.
That's another example of how the entire, how most of the entire planet has gone into a quantum jump.
Right. And we would expect that when we look at, see, what I love to do is I love to look at the philosophy of it. Like, is it possible? I'm an optimist, right? I like to ask, how good can it get? I believe nature works that way. And I love philosophers that show us how that works. Like I love Leibniz, one of the inventors of calculus. I love his take on what consciousness is, because he believes that we have that first perception, which is like zero, first, like a zero-dimensional awareness, and then you step back and you have a reflective cognitive reflection on that first level perception, that is consciousness. So that's calculus too. So you've got Leibniz showing how consciousness has this multi-leveled reflective quality to it. I think he's exactly right. But we've got a modern day philosopher who takes that and takes the ball and runs with it. And that's our beautiful philosopher who wrote the book Axiogenesis. His name is Nicholas Rescher. He's out of Pennsylvania, an octogenarian. Oh, he's beautiful. But here's why. So when you think like, yeah, it's like everyone's changing. Yes, we are. So you'll see evidence as we do that the human body is changing to be, we're actually witnessing physiological changes in real time with our organs and with our bone structure that's making us better than we've ever been. It's happening instantly with no trace of any change. It's like it's always been that way. Like our heart is protected in our under the ribs cage in the center of the chest.
There's got to be something causing it. Maybe because we all know how our reality is based on frequency and vibration. Maybe maybe if there's a bad earthquake or something, the vibration of the earthquake puts the whole earth into a different jump. It's got to be something causing it.
Well, if you look at this is where it gets interesting, because I go back to noticing that all these shifts we're observing look like quantum phenomena. They all do. To me, that's like, well, every single thing we're seeing is normal on the so-called quantum realm. What if the realm isn't a realm? What if the theory of everything physicists are right, and we actually are witnessing quantum phenomena on the celestial scale? So that we remember, for example, we used to be in the Sagittarius arm of the Milky Way, but now suddenly apparently we've always been in the Orion section. That's very different for a lot of us, myself included. So if something like that can happen, if our kidneys, like you might remember where your kidneys are. I remember they used to be like my lower back, like you put your hands when you climb up a hill and you put your hands there to get some rest. Mm-hmm. But now they're safe. That there used to be a kidney punch, and if you kicked or hit someone in their lower back, they might start bleeding in their urine, and that meant they might die very soon. No longer is that a risk, because the kidneys on every single one of us, like 8 billion humans on the planet, all of our kidneys have moved up under our rib cage, all of them. So we're experiencing huge shifts in our bodies, which look like they're for our welfare. It looks like it's like these jumps in evolution that we see, like missing links in the evolutionary system. It looks like we're doing this right now, and we're able to see it if we pay attention and compare notes with what we remember.
And nobody notices this. That'd be like all of us waking up tomorrow and we only have 4 fingers and 4 toes, and we just always remember having 4 fingers and 4 toes.
Well, there are some of us that are remembering these other histories, and these are the Mandela effect affected. But many of us who are researching this, myself included, agree that probably everyone's experiencing it. It's just not everyone's noticing it, and that's okay. So not everyone does notice it. And that's where some of these phrases, like they took the download, or it's kind of, because you can actually see it happen. You can ask someone, what do you remember? Like, what's a kidney punch? They'll tell you. I ask martial artists this, and they show me, like, okay, where are your kidneys? They put their hands kind of in that lower back area, and then I can just ask them, or I tell them, but that's not where they are right now. You can look it up. That's still like an illegal move. Don't do that kidney punch, but it doesn't do anything anymore because the kidneys aren't there. They've moved to safety up a little bit higher, under the ribs.
So what do terms like reality residue and take the download mean?
Yeah, we're talking about the take the download. It ties in with what we were discussing a minute ago about the collective, like there might be a collective consciousness, awareness of what's happening overall, and then there is always perhaps a bit of a difference with our individual experiences. So, and that's true even amongst the Mandela effect affected, that we might not, like some of these don't ring bells for me. Sex and the City was not a show that I watched, so some people say it's Sex and the Cities in the City. I really have no idea. It was not on my radar, so no idea at all. Some of them I'm sort of only distantly aware of, but okay, so take the download would mean, like, let's take a look at, for example, what's a good one? I think I'm trying to think of one that's good for everybody. I think everyone knows Star Wars, so we'll go with one that resonates for me. Yeah, you like Star Wars.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so there's in the movie, the second movie, which was, I guess, episode number, what would it be, 5? It would
The
be
Empire Strikes Back.
exactly, and that's the one where there's that pivotal moment where Luke Skywalker is dangling, sort of hanging by a thread, and above him is Darth Vader, and there's that really dramatic moment, and the deep booming tones of the actor who plays Darth Vader. It's quite memorable for me because I saw this movie in the theater when it first came out, and that's James Earl Jones. You know his voice; it's just like very deep. I remember that he said, Luke, I am your father. But now, to take the download would be if for me to ask someone what, fill in the blank. What's the dialogue in this pivotal movie scene? Not let them hear it, but just ask them to say what they think it is. And maybe they say, Luke, I'm your father. And then I play what it currently is, which is James Earl Jones's voice saying, no, I am your father. And take the download would be that moment where the person hears that, and then it's kind of like something weird happens. Like they were agreeing with you. It was Luke, I am your father. But now they've heard that, and they're like, yeah, it's always been no, I'm your father. And they won't even agree or go back to that first position because they have taking the download is very analogous to being consumed by or being part of that flock of consciousness. It's like a flock of birds flying together that believe the existing historical truth, which is it's always been, no, I'm your father.
Well, that's an interesting way that you put it, like take the download, like there's a controller, in our Matrix universe, that's really all a simulation that's pretty much updating the system,
Right.
You know where I'm going there, like how some people think that this is all a simulation and we're all a computer program, and
right,
maybe that has something to do with it,
It might, but it's just a partial. In my opinion, the simulation theory is a good start, but it doesn't go to rock bottom because it sort of parks us at a point of familiarity where we don't as soon as we label something or name it, we think we understand it. Like, oh, it's a computer, it's a simulation. But most of us don't know how to build a computer or write the machine language or the operating system, or let alone the code to create that simulation. So for us, it's just sort of like, oh, we've labeled it, now we can ignore it, and we don't have to think. The thinking that would be required is, okay, if it is a simulation, what is it simulating? And who is doing the simulation? And so because it hasn't answered those questions, we just sort of parked it in a familiar parking spot. Like, oh, we have computers. We don't know how to write machine language or build our own computer chips. Of course not. We just know how to use them. So we can pretend that that's what's going on because it's the black box, and therefore we don't have to look inside of it. We're familiar with not looking. Don't ask any more questions when you're running a simulation, right? Like, no one's going to demand that you suddenly do a Martha Stewart moment and build your computer from scratch. Like, okay, I'll give you all of the materials you need. Here's your silicon. Here's your soldering iron. Build your computer. Write the machine language, the operating system, and all the code. There, go. It's like, no, we don't expect that. So that's why I say simulation theory is lazy in a way, because it doesn't really address the actual issue.
And what about reality residue?
Reality residue is fascinating. It gives us, it's a form of validation, if you will, or evidence based on usually artworks of some form. But the art could actually be just someone typing in a price sticker or label. Like they might type in Berenstein Bears and they spell it the way they remember it. So they work at Walmart or whatever. They actually type in Berenstein, EIN, and Bears, and then they price it. And so, but then someone at the store, they're holding in their hands the actual Berenstain books, AIN, with a price label that says EIN. And so that's reality residue, where some person, based on their own memory, typed something into a system that shows they remember it the way a lot of us do. It could also be in the form of a painting or a scale model, like the JFK vehicle that he was in when he was assassinated. So it's the whole, because there's controversy about the Zapruder film and how many people were in the car. So you might see a historical reenactment or a historical, like a scale model of the vehicle that shows a lot fewer people in the vehicle, which is what a lot of people remember. Now it's like there were 6 people in the car or something. And if that's before people's time, that's okay. But it's not about any one
Well, there were
particular
four. There were four
thing.
people in the
Yeah.
car, wasn't there?
There were how many?
4?
Yeah, that's what a lot of people remember. But now it's like I think there's more than that. It's very odd.
Oh, I'll
That's
have
one
to
that
definitely
I
go back
wasn't
and look
tracking
again.
that quite so closely. So for me, it's sort of a blurry peripheral thing. It's like, that does seem a bit weird. But for some people, that's the one. It's a lot of people, they feel like, okay, that's it. I can't go with the official story because I remember something very different.
Huh. Now, you just had a Mandela Effect conference. What is
Yes.
that? Do you do them often?
Yeah, well, we just started our nonprofit organization. We just got that designation this year. We would love to pursue research in this area because it's been neglected or ignored by most of science. So it's our goal to provide education and eventually, hopefully, funding as well for researchers to actually be able to delve into this topic, which we consider to be world changing and also a very positive phenomenon. We tend to see it as part of human evolution, that we're definitely in this great awakening that we were talking about. And obviously, people need resources. So we're hoping to do these events at least annually. We do have a board of directors, and we've started talking about how we can meet people's needs. Our first event was originally we'd planned to do an in-person conference in Connecticut. And that did not happen because the pandemic that's happening right now required that we could not all gather in one place. So in a very short time frame, we switched over from what would have been a 3-day in-person conference. We stretched it out to 6 live days over the course of a week, starting on a Saturday and going through the next Friday in June. And all of those presentations from 14 presenters, and Regina Meredith was our keynote speaker. And she's the one who was largely recognized as starting Gaia TV. She was remarkable. And a lot of our speakers were extraordinary. On the board of directors with me is the quantum businessman, Christopher Anatra. And then Jerry Dark Wolf Hicks, who has a program on Wednesday nights on the Rip and Rabbit Hole radio show. Also is Shane Robinson of Unbiased and on the Fence on YouTube. And then we've got our very special resource, our Canadian artist, Kimberly Lynn Hansen, and she has created, I believe, the first exhibit of Mandela Effect art that is extraordinary. And she brought it to the event that we had in 2019 before we were officially a nonprofit organization. So that would be Ketchum, Idaho, November of 2019. And that's those videos showing her art and talking about that with some real-time delayed choice reality shifts happening. Some of the time stuff occurred in her talk, and it's really worth seeing. And that's all on the International Mandela Effect Conference YouTube channel.
Yeah, the next time you have one and it's a in-person event, definitely let us know here at Conflict Radio. We will be there.
Awesome. I would love to have you there.
This is a fascinating topic for me, as you can imagine, simply because of my experience, and I don't want to miss anything like that. Did any Mandela effects occur during that?
Yes, absolutely. We had a couple of real doozies occurred. So I don't even know where to start.
Can you share them?
Yeah, well, I hinted at something that happened in the talk that Kimberly Lynn Hansen gave. Actually, several happened. One of them just going to leave to her talk because I don't want to spoil it. So I'm going to leave that one. It's a 2-part thing, and please watch them, and
And
you'll see what I mean.
They can find that where again? Just
Okay, the channel, you want to subscribe to it, everybody. It's called International Mandela Effect Conference. And it's a long name, but it's on YouTube. And once you're subscribed, then you can browse through the videos and go back to, it would be Kimberly Lynn Hansen's 2-part presentation. Really excellent. So there's definitely something going on in there that's extraordinary. Okay, but in addition to that, we had several other things. So I'll start with, they're mind-blowing. Okay, one of them, which I think is well worth watching, this occurred, and you can see it in the video, where the quantum businessman, Christopher Anatra, is interviewing Jerry Darkwolf Hicks, who was the host of our first conference and is the father of IMEC, or International Mandela Effect Conference. So Chris is talking to Jerry, and as they're talking, Jerry brings up something about how, I forget the exact context. It was something about how the Mandela effect might be challenging some of the authority regime on the planet. And just as, and Chris was saying, should we always ask questions? Should we always stand up for what we believe in? And Jerry said something like, yes, we should always do that. And then you can hear this sort of crash off camera. As he's talking, one of the pieces of art fell off the wall. And I texted, I was in the room when this happened, and I sent a text immediately to Kimberly Lynn Hansen, the Canadian artist that created this, a whole series of artworks based on various Mandela effects. And she, without knowing which piece fell, she asked me, I told her what had happened. I said, whoa, something just fell off, one of your pieces of art fell off the wall. And she said, was it Darth Vader? Ha ha. And I said, yes. She knew. Okay. So it's like, she said, my art speaks, it talks, it communicates. Mm-hmm. And so right when, that was funny, but I'm just starting with the sort of average run-of-the-mill Mandela effects. They get trippier. So that would be what I'd call, like, that's cool. You could call it synchronicity. You could say that's nothing. Okay, fine. Let's go one bigger. And I don't want to take up too much of the time with just what happened at the conference. This was a small conference, by the way. It was our first gathering with those of us who are now IMEC, before we were IMEC. And I think we had maybe 20, 30 people in the room. So it was not very big. Nevertheless, one of the participants had been taking a nap in her room when another participant with her son at the same time remembers clearly having had a very detailed conversation with the woman who was napping in her room out in front of the hotel on the steps, just talking for maybe 30 to 40 minutes before one of them had to go, do whatever they had to do. So this was, and not only did she and her son remember the conversation, they remember what was said. Okay, so they were talking about this after, and this had all come up after I'd given my talk on how sometimes I bilocate. And I'd given examples of my bilocations where I'm daydreaming in that daydream state of mind. So I think I'm trapped inside at a book event, looking out on a beautiful day, wishing I was outside, thinking I'm walking down the street, a very certain street, where someone observes me walking down that street and emails me later that day, hey, Cynthia, I thought you had a book event today. What were you doing walking down Solano Avenue? And I said, whoa, really? So I talked about that. Okay, now here we are at the conference, and it's happening again. It's happening to two of the participants in the conference. I came across them that evening, and as they were very confused, the one who claimed, that's impossible. You could not have been talking to me because I was taking a nap in my room. I never came out of my room. I had so much to process. I just went straight to my room and I took a nap. That's what I was doing. And so I asked that woman, were you possibly daydreaming at all? She said, yes, I didn't exactly sleep. I just sort of, I guess you could call it that. I was daydreaming. And I said, where were you? Do you remember where you were daydreaming? And she's just thinking about that. But the funny thing is, what the woman and her son remember that the other woman had said, it was very detailed. I'm not going to go into all the details, but they described it to her and she was mind blown. She said, that's all true. My husband doesn't believe in the Mandela effect. He doesn't like it. He's not happy that I'm studying it, and some other, I'm not going to go into the more detailed stuff, is personal. But the point is, there's no way that woman and her son could possibly have learned all this, let alone seen her, but they did. So there was a bilocation that occurred at the Mandela Effect Conference.
Oh, that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I love these live events. I mean, the online ones are cool too, but
yeah, and the one that you just did was online, right?
that's right. It was set up to be free online. We are a nonprofit, so right now we're being funded by our own resources. Jerry Hicks put in a lot of his own time, effort, money, blood, and everything. He really is the father of IMEC. Then our quantum businessman, of course, is a CEO of a company and a software company. So he has generously been able to provide us with a lot of resources to make this online and make it free, thank goodness. I don't think it would have happened this way otherwise. And I've put a lot of my own money, time, and effort in as well. And so has Shane Robinson of Unbiased and On the Fence, and as well as Kimberly Lynn Hansen. So those of us who are on the board of directors in whatever capacity have definitely contributed to making it free and available. We just felt with what was going on in the world, it's so important for the information to be available, and it didn't make any sense to charge for it. Plus, it was our first time even doing this online, so
yeah,
for all those reasons, yeah.
These are definitely very crazy and interesting times that we're living in. How can you see the Mandela effect providing us with something useful in these coronavirus times?
Well, to me, the Mandela effect represents the best of what humanity has to offer in collaboration with nature, with each other, with the world. I think that what I see for potential with humanity right now is very much that we can step into being caretakers of this earth with each other, caretakers for ourselves, each other, the planet, to learn to be much more creatively active. We already are creative with our hands. We're creative with our hearts, with our bodies. What we're learning now is to be creative at another level of connectivity, so that we're becoming creative with our thoughts, having the power to be creative in themselves. And that's something that maybe we should never have been trusted with previously. Some people might say we're still not trustworthy, but for those of us who believe that we're divinely guided and we get chances for these do-overs, like you experienced. I mean, maybe that wasn't a do-over, but you definitely got that chance to recognize what it's like to be in that in-between state. I think that's the essence of the quantum jump, to know that you can go there no matter what it looks like is happening. The message that I would say is there's always hope. No matter how bad it might look, you can go to that in-between place, that daydream state, and just be pure consciousness, because that's what the father of quantum physics said we are. He said, that was Max Planck. He said that nothing gets behind consciousness. Fundamentally, everything is conscious and consciousness, and you can't get behind it. That means we're not going to find consciousness in neurons in the brain. That's a fool's errand. We already know that we've got neurons in our heart, we've got a brain in our stomachs, in our gut. So what are we wasting our time, trying to find some material explanation, when obviously, as you experienced, and as so many of us are experiencing, we have a very sort of this eternal, infinite quality to ourselves. It is a spiritual awakening. We can recognize that we can access this in-between state of all possibility and start learning to make good choices. We might feel like we're stuck in there for years. That sounds like a terrible thing to go through.
No, that's exactly it. Yeah, but
yeah,
you're not. You're not. That's just
you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the realities that I was actually in, I knew it wasn't the right reality because one of my a male family member that has passed in this reality was alive in that one. So I knew I was in the wrong reality because this person was alive in that reality. And if I had understood exactly what was going on, if I was intentionally doing that, I would have hung out there a little bit longer and maybe had a conversation or something with this person. And I didn't. Like, as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh, this is the wrong one. And I was poof, gone. Because I was so panicked because I couldn't find my way back to this one. So
Yeah, it's kind of like going down the hallway and opening all the doors. Like, oops, wrong room. Oops.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's exactly what it was, and it's a dark hallway. That in between is kind of dark. It's a dark in between. You know,
right,
it's kind of like you're not seeing anything.
right.
You know.
Yet all the possibilities are immediately available.
So, what kind of scientific validation exists for any of this?
Ah, good thing you asked that. I love it. Well, that's the other thing I've been doing besides providing solace and just this ability to let people know you're not going crazy in these last 20 years. The other thing I do is I look to quantum physics in particular, but also related fields to see um, what are we finding in the laboratory settings that can provide some basis to better understand this or even validate it to begin with. And a
Yeah, I
big
mean, they're
breakthrough came.
obviously studying it at Cornell.
Excellent. Yeah, I need now. I love that you brought that up because it was not on my radar, but now it's like that is so cool. So definitely check that out. One of the big news stories that I was aware of from 2019 came to us courtesy of laboratories in physics at the University of Vienna, Austria, in collaboration with quantum physicists at Edinburgh, Scotland. And what they were doing is taking the very classic, in fact, it's considered the most classic science experiment ever created, which is the double slit experiment. And what they did is they wanted to find out if they had two trusted detection observational systems set up at the same place in the same time, would they actually witness two different possible answers to what's happening there? The reason they were doing this had to do with very much that I talked about levels of consciousness earlier. Remember when I mentioned the zero dimension, and that's like and then one dimension, that's like a touch, and then two dimensions is a level above it. Each time you go up, then you're doing a reflective perception of the previous level of awareness, and that's how consciousness, according to Leibniz, the philosopher, grows. So within the physics world, the famous physicist Erwin Schrödinger devised an experiment that he originally intended to show how ludicrous quantum physics really is. He imagined that you could put a cat into an imaginary box, imaginary cat, imaginary box with imaginary poison. So you're not going to kill no real cats will be injured in this experiment. It's a thought experiment. And the trigger mechanism would be quantum. It would be based on radioactive isotope decay, which decays at a totally random rate. So the end result is until you open the box, nobody knows if the cat is alive or dead. So that's the Schrödinger cat experiment. What happened next is another physicist named Wigner said, well, hang on there, Schrödinger. That's a bizarre experiment, and it does look weird that you can have a cat that's both alive and dead in the box because we know quantum physics says you can have a superposition of states, which is like your in-between conflict when you're in that in-between.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but then Wigner is saying, okay, we're watching this whole thing. What happens when you entangle an observer who's watching the person who's watching the cat? So that is the construct, that who's watching who, kind of a stair-stepping levels of consciousness route thing. And they brought that into the double slit experiment. I'm sorry if I'm going too fast. Hopefully
No,
people know the double
I'm
slit
following.
experiment. Yeah. But even if you don't, it doesn't matter. Just the outcome is interesting. You can look at this up, and I did blog about it, so people can check that out. And you can find all my information on my website, realityshifters.com. So you'll probably mention that in the link. But anyway, so the point about this article in 2019 is, thanks to the whole idea of multiple observers, they set up, the scientists at Edinburgh, Scotland, and Vienna, Austria, collaborated to create this apparatus which had two observers at the same place, same time. And here's the drum roll and the bizarre result. The bizarre result is they were able to reliably, accurately, verifiably observe two completely different realities at the same place and same time. That should have been 2019's cover story, in my opinion, that there is no such thing as objective reality.
So where do you think all this goes? Like in the future, what?
Where it's going is humanity gradually, step by step, learning to work together collaboratively, to make the free will choice to wish the best for all concerned, to learn that when you think something, it can and often does have a very real physical effect. We're basically sliding into the driver's seat of a car that we don't know what we're doing with. Some of us feel like, what the heck? It's like putting dogs in the driver's seat. I love those videos. Well, that's what it looks like humans are doing right now. We're learning to operate consciousness at a level that most of us are a little ill prepared to deal with. So, fortunately, you were noticing this is the wrong reality for me. But we're learning to basically do these quantum jumps to find out that you've got a diagnosis from your doctor, that you've got 2 months to live, but you've got a lot of people praying for you, and people feel like, no, and next thing you know, you're fine. And nobody knows what happened to that cancer. That's what happened to my grandmother. She had inoperable liver cancer in her 90s, and it completely vanished because she did have hundreds of people praying for her. And I was one of the people that was like, no. And next thing we know, there's no trace of cancer anywhere in her body. So the blood tests, they had tissue samples, blood tests, everything, and scans, you name it. And suddenly none of those showed that she had liver cancer anymore.
Well,
So that's
like
where we're going.
The power of manifestation.
Yes.
Well, I guess I have a few I guess not personal questions, but have you ever been in the in between?
Not for years, as you describe, but I would say I think what you mean by the in between is that when you're still in a body, you're still alive. Because I actually remember what it's like when I'm dead, which is blissful, and that feels different. But this state, when you are in a body and you are, but you're just sort of like all over the place, not quite the way you describe it. And when I go through the in between, it's like I'm striding through more purposefully. It's not. Sometimes I'll just sort of hang out there, like let's take a look at what's available. So sometimes I'll choose my day that way, kind of like look at all, like flipping through pages in a book. Sometimes, but I don't usually. It's certainly I've never had that experience that you described where it went on for years. At least not in this lifetime.
Yeah.
Probably I have had that experience in a lifetime, because once you go through that, you probably don't need to go through it again. It's one of those things like, good heavens. I bet you'll never do that again.
It's very depressing. So what do you think would have happened to my physical body had I not been able to find my way back?
Oh, a number of things might have happened. And you might have glimpsed versions of it. It would depend on different people's experiences. So the people that felt like they need you back, they would experience you back. Again, the results from the 2019 physics experiment. There's no such thing as objective reality. So just the same reason that some people experience some Mandela effects but not others, and they know, and sometimes they'll experience them at different times. Our reality is very, very fluid. It's not as solid as it looks at all. So some people might have noticed, like, wow, conflict went into a coma. What happened? Is he coming back? So it's like that uncertainty. Yeah. Other people would just feel like you're there, but you're spaced out, like you're not really all there.
Yeah.
And some people with the Mandela effect community say that we've got people who are sleepwalking or NPCs, like non-player characters.
Yeah. Huh. Well, we really appreciate having you come on our show. It's very interesting. We'd love to get you back on. Perhaps, if you got a new book coming out soon. What are you working on currently?
Well, I'm definitely working still with this new IMEC nonprofit organization that we've just created a few months ago. So we're looking into more events, perhaps even in addition to the annual. There are discussions going on about that. But then, of course, I'm still putting out my monthly Reality Shifters newsletter, what I've published every month for more than 20 years. So people can subscribe to that for free. And that's where I share information such as this news that we've got 2 new to me researchers looking into these JOT and DOP phenomena, which really is the Mandela effect, going all the way back to the 1950s, with validation that people experiencing this are definitely not crazy. And that comes from a psychologist. So I'll share news like that in my monthly newsletter, as well as what happened at the conference where we had 14 speakers. And I've also got a podcast, Living the Quantum Dream, that's on hiatus at the moment, but it'll probably come back. And I'm working on a new book. So in my world, I'm always doing something.
And what's your website? Where can everybody find you again?
Yes,
And you
that
have a
is
YouTube
Reality
channel
Shifters.
as well.
Yeah, right. Okay, my website is www.realityshifters.com. The idea being that we're all Mandela affected. We're all experiencing these experiences. We may not be aware of all being in that in between, but my goodness, I know we are. I know we're going through it. What's different is some of us are more conscious of it, therefore more called, like you are. And thank you for putting this show together, and taking what was just a bizarre experience and truly making the most of it.
I'm not done. I plan on doing a lot more homework and research into that because that's definitely interesting. And your YouTube channel,
Yes.
you want to tell everybody what your YouTube channel is?
Absolutely. That's Cynthia. It's my name, Cynthia Sue Larson, and that's on YouTube. And of course, I do my best to put out about one video a month usually. I might be able to post. We did a Mandela montage, which was so cute. Little 10-second video clips of a whole bunch of YouTubers in the Mandela effect community. It's extremely uplifting, and we're just making sure that we're clear on using the music in the background. So as soon as we get clearance so that we won't have any copyright violations, then everyone involved can share that video. In fact, I think we probably recommend everybody can share it. So that's the goal, and that should be coming out pretty soon too, both on my YouTube and also the IMEC. And I'm associated with that conference, which you can go to their website too, imec.world. And that's all of us who are working together to bring educational information about this phenomena into the world at large, and also scientific community as well.
Again? I'm sorry, what was that website again? The
IMEC, that's International Mandela Effect Conference.world. And that would give you, as soon as we get each of the individual presentations, they'll be available there. You can see our mission, our goals, and future events that we'll be presenting will all be mentioned there.
All right, awesome. As normal, everybody listening, I'll put the links down in the description. Definitely check it out. And thanks very much, Cynthia, for coming on.
Thank you, Conflict. It's really been a great pleasure.
And we'll be right back right after this. Welcome back. That was Cynthia Sue Larson. You know, that was a really interesting conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I definitely had a lot of questions about quantum jumping. I don't really know if what I was experiencing was a dream or if it was real. I don't have any idea. It's definitely something that, as my wife said, could be in my subconscious that I heard before. I mean, I don't know. I really don't. I think that it's good to learn about it. I think it's good to think about the possibilities of what could be and what our reality might be. I definitely feel as if I was quantum jumping that night. I really do. But I might not have been. I could have been dreaming. I'll admit it. I don't know. But, you know, as the world turns and we learn things and we grow as an intelligent species, we're going to learn new things about ourselves that we don't know. And I think that's what makes shows like this so great, is that we're able to talk about and learn about things that we otherwise would never learn about or talk about. And I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. As always, this is Conflict Radio. Like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Say hi. If you have anything you wish to say, shoot me an email at info@conflictradio.net. I'll respond. I respond to everybody that shoots me an email. I'll respond to you. Give me a shout out. Also, you can find us on Spreaker and Apple iTunes and other great podcast platforms. And until next time, we'll be here. Be safe. You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings, and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is July 17th, 2020, and we are full on into the summer. I hope everybody's enjoying it as much as they can, granted everything that's happening in the world today. Today, we're going to be speaking with Anthony Peake. Anthony Peake was born in 1954, grew up on the Wirral near Liverpool, England. He was educated at the Wirral Grammar School, Warwick University, and the London School of Economics. He is a member of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, the Scientific and Medical Network, and the Society for Psychic Research. He has written a ton of books. His latest, The Hidden Universe, an investigation in the non-human intelligences, is available on his website, anthonypeake.com. That's Peake. He's going to be joining us today to discuss a lot of things, including the content of The Hidden Universe. So we're just going to jump right into it. We'll be right back, right after this. Welcome back to Conflict Radio. We're with Anthony Peake. His newest book, The Hidden Universe, an investigation into non-human intelligences, is out now. Anthony, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Michael, and how are you over there in the States?
Pretty good. It's quite a crazy time, that's for sure.
Oh, totally strange. I've just come off a call with a friend of mine who's based in London, but she's at the moment staying with family in Ontario, and it's the same kind of thing. We were discussing just how weird the world is and how you can't really plan the future anymore in the way you used to be able to. It's a disturbing time. It is a strange time, but maybe it's here to test us in some way. As somebody once said to me, it's one of those. It's a 3-foot judge. I don't know if you've ever heard that term.
No, I haven't actually.
Okay, it's one of those small things sent to try us.
Well, it's definitely trying us for sure.
It certainly is.
You want to tell us about your newest book, The Hidden Universe? What is it about? An investigation in the non-human intelligences. Like, we can't even figure our own out.
Yes, finding intelligence is quite difficult sometimes. The book really is the culmination of my 11 books, well, my 10 books and 11 books, including this one. And it's very much my interest in when people encounter entities, non-human entities in out-of-the-body experiences, near-death experiences, UFO encounters with the Fae, encounters with goblins, whatever we want to call it. I wanted to do the science of it. I wanted to understand, rather than just writing a book which just reports all these weird and wonderful encounters from around the world, as you know from my writing style, is to do the science first and to understand exactly what might be taking place when this happens. And this was the reason behind the book. And I'm really pleased with how well this book came out, and indeed how well it's been received, both nationally and internationally, because I come up with a quite revolutionary new approach to the whole argument of exactly what are these entities that we encounter in these experiences. Are they independent of us, or are they in some way a reflection of our own psyche, or are they even created by us in some bizarre way? And indeed, my latest work, which I'm working on at the moment, will be taking that one step further.
So can you tell us what have you discovered? What are they part of us, or are they?
They are both. In my opinion, and of course it's only my opinion based upon my own research into the subject, interviewing lots of people and doing work into neurology, neurochemistry and various other areas, is that I'm very much of the school of people like John Keel and Jacques Vallée, who's arguing that whatever the entities are, They are not what they seem to be. They seem to present themselves in a particular way to reflect the societies that they're within. They also reflect the technology they're in, because as we know from the histories of UFO encounters, if you looked about way back to the airship flaps of the 1890s in central areas of the United States, the entities that were in these flying machines were basically human. Not only were they human, but they had human behaviors. And when asked where they came from, they usually turned around and said they came from Germany or they came from Europe somewhere. Clearly they weren't, but that's what they claimed. And then we roll forward and we get into after the Keith Arnold encounter at Mount Rainier in the late 1940s. We are then in the space age, when Sputnik went up and everything. And suddenly the aliens then became entities that seemed to be from out of space, and they reflected the mores and the ideas of what aliens would look like at that time. Then as time developed, they seemed to morph into something stranger again. But if you look throughout history, these entities have been with us since forever. From ancient cave paintings. And in the book, I start off with evidence of a group of cave paintings that were discovered in 2017 in northern India, which nobody had been in there for at least 10,000 years. And when the cave paintings were discovered, what did they discover the cave paintings showing? Flying machines and creatures with large black eyes and peculiar shaped skulls. So clearly, whatever the grey image is, it seems to be something that is consistent throughout time. But what really intrigued me, and it was to do with experiences within my own life regarding my own mother, and this is a really curious tale, is that around about 8 or 9 years ago, my mother phoned me up one evening and said she'd had a peculiar encounter. She lives on a comparatively isolated village in the northwest of England, and she was going on to the village with my aunt, and my aunt stopped to tie her shoelace. And as my aunt went down to tie her shoelace, my mother said that she saw flying over a local factory what she described as being a disc of smoke. She said the disc of smoke moved very, very quickly, started to revolve, and then shot off towards North Wales. She said, what did I see? And I said, I've no idea, Mother. It could have been because you're partially sighted. There could be many issues here. But what I didn't say was that she'd seen a UFO, because my mother is not into UFOs. I mean, she's an elderly lady. She was in her late 80s. It's not in her worldview. So she wasn't going to anticipate this. Anyway, 2 days later, I get a phone call early one morning, and she's in a state of absolute hysterics. And I tried to calm her down, and then she explained to me that she woke up in the middle of the night in a state of sleep paralysis. Now, as you know, sleep paralysis is when you wake up, but you're not fully awake. You're in something called REM intrusion. It's whereby you're effectively dreaming, but you're also perceiving the world around you. And dream images will project themselves into three-dimensional space. It's as if you're having a waking dream, and you also cannot move. And she said that she noticed that the bedroom door was open. Now, she lives alone, and she was quite worried about this. And then she said, and she described how 3 spindly fingers came round the edge of the door, and this little creature poked its head round the door. And this is literally how she described it. She said it looked insectoid. It had huge black eyes. It had 2 holes for a nose and a slit for a mouth. It looked at me, realized I'd seen it, and dodged back. And she said, and then I sort of dozed off to sleep in a state of absolute terror. And she said, Tony, what did I see? And I started to explain to her that, it was just a dream. It was just a dream. But for me, having been interested in ufology since the mid-1960s, I immediately recognized this to being a grey. Now, why would a little old lady in her late 80s, who had no experience or reading about these entities, describe an entity that was exactly the same as people 10,000 years ago were painting on cave walls in northern India? On top of this, there are a series of caves in southern Africa called the Junction Shelter, where Graham Hancock, the ancient history guy, was down there, and he noticed there on the cave paintings there showed exactly the same entities. Clearly, these are entities that have been with us for a long time, and I think that in medieval times and throughout history, they've been interpreted as being fairies, they've been interpreted as goblins, kobolds, gnomes, elves, many, many things. But they're the same thing. They're the same manifestation. They are linked normally to caves, to darkness, and to me, there is a direct link here. And what I argue in the book is that They are part of our subconscious, but, and this is the important but, they are also independent of us. They use our consciousness to manifest themselves in this consensual reality.
Well, that's interesting. Are they part of the hologram, so to speak? Are they part of the illusion?
In probably yes. They are not part of this particular version of reality. They're not part of the holographic nature of reality. They seem to exist in a liminal place, which is between what I call the kenoma, which is this reality, the reality that is created by our senses for us. In other words, the perceptual world that we perceive is not what it seems. It's created by the brain using data and information, and the brain then creates out of this data and out of this information an external world. And this external world is shared by others because others are co-creating it as well. Now, the world then is co-created by others, and we inhabit this almost dream sequence that we're creating. Now, again, people who might find this an extraordinary statement I'm making here, but there is nothing I'm saying here that isn't actually based upon known science. Okay, and it is to do with quantum physics, and it's to do with something called the collapse of the wave function. In quantum physics, it is known that subatomic particles, until they are observed or measured, do not exist in the way we normally understand existence to be. A subatomic particle, before it has been measured, is contained in what's called a wave function. And a wave function is effectively a statistical wave in exactly the same way that a crime wave is a statistical informational wave. And the argument is that a subatomic particle, until it is observed, has the statistical potentiality to be located anywhere in the universe. When it is measured or observed, that subatomic particle changes from being a wave function to being a point particle that exists in three-dimensional space-time. The whole of the visual world and the whole of the physical world that we think is out there and is solid is made up of countless numbers of these subatomic particles, all of which are brought into existence by the act of measurement or the act of observation. So therefore, whatever is out there, it is not quite what it seems. For example, you people listening on here, people listening to this, and Michael, you at home sitting, I presume, on a chair, the only reason you don't fall through the chair is something called electrostatic repulsion. Effectively, the molecules in your chair and the atoms that make up the molecules of your chair are 99.9999999999996 empty space. Okay? Literally empty space. The things that are supposedly solid within the atom and within the nucleus of the atom are the electrons, which are point particles, which means they have no extension in space. And inside the nucleus are things, subatomic particles, the proton and the neutron. The proton and the neutron are not basic particles. They are in turn made of things called quarks. And each one of them is made up of a mixture of three different types of quarks, either 2 down and 1 up, or 1 up or 2 down quarks. The quarks themselves are then again point particles, which means that they have no existence, they have no extension in space. So everything that is solid out there is not solid, it is empty space, okay? So when you say you see things, what are you really seeing? Well, what you're actually seeing are photons, and photons are also subatomic particles, which are called bosons, which are the carriers of the electromagnetic signal. Now, photons themselves, the tiny point particles, again, are waves and particles depending upon whether they are observed or not. As we know, light seems to have wave-like things and point particle type things as well. Something called the twin slit experiment has proven this time and time and time again. Now, the interesting thing about photons is photons can only ever travel at the speed of light. They cannot travel at any other speed. Now, we know from Einstein's theory of relativity, we know at the speed of light something very peculiar happens. Time stops. So from the point of view of a photon, there is no time. So in other words, the photon hitting your eye at the moment, the photons that are giving you the viewpoint of the world, effectively from their point of view, they could have left left the sun 8.5 minutes ago. But as far as they're concerned, there is no time. They are still, you seeing them and them leaving the sun is exactly the same instant. But not only that, you look at the night sky at the Andromeda Galaxy, the light waves that are coming from the Andromeda Galaxy are in exactly the same position. From their point of view, there is no time. Everything is just the present moment. Now, on top of that, photons have zero mass, which means they don't exist in three-dimensional space. So what do we have here? We have objects that don't exist in space and time, that live in a timeless location and exist in a timeless location, that are allowing your eyes to see and bounce off objects in external reality that are, and I won't say it again, 99.9 to the factor, empty space. The empty space that we actually perceive is much more mysterious. So when we think that we are seeing an external reality, we're seeing something far more peculiar and far more strange. Now, that reality that we perceive, we see, the science is coming to conclude that it's holographic in nature. The brain processes the information from digital information that is supplied to it. And these entities are part of that digital information field, but they're not part of this particularly vibrationary state. They are subtly different. And I believe that the entities that we perceive are actually made of not matter as we understand it to be with our and everything else, but something called plasma. Now, plasma is an ionized gas. Ions are it's another form of, like, you have water, you have gas, and you have solid objects. It's another form of matter that is different to all three of those, and I think this is where the clues lie.
So we only see maybe 10% of visual stimuli out there. Is it possible that they exist beyond what we are able to perceive?
We see far less than 10%. Depends, again, the question when you start moving into this is, what do we mean by visual stimuli? Now, I would argue that visual stimuli is the part of the electromagnetic spectrum that our eyes are attuned to process into something visual, which is literally light. Okay, now light is a very, very small part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And I used the analysis in one of my books, and I said, imagine the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, electromagnetic energy, which is effectively light, it's all photons, it's all light, but it moves from radio waves at one end to gamma waves at the other. And imagine that's like a continuum. If that continuum was the Mississippi River, the Mississippi River, as we know, starts in a little lake up in Minnesota, moves all its way down through the central parts of the United States and comes out in the Gulf of Mexico. If that was the electromagnetic spectrum, what we think is the visual world and everything we believe is physically out there is 1.5 inches, about 8 miles south of Hannibal, Missouri. The rest of it we cannot perceive. We sometimes can sense a certain form of light called infrared light, which is on the infrared side of the spectrum, and that we feel as heat. We also have on the other end, we have ultraviolet. But we know that bees can see ultraviolet light. We know that they see the world in a very, very different way. I call this electromagnetic chauvinism. It's the idea that just because our visual field tells us that this is what is real, of course it isn't, because little things like the color red does not exist in external reality. There is no color red. There is no color green. There is no color blue. These are literally just what our brain processes a certain vibrationary state of the electromagnetic spectrum to be like. There is no red out there. There is no color out there. There's no sound out there either. And this is so important. Sound is literally moving airwaves vibrating on your inner ear, and your brain processing that as a sound. But sound does not exist unless there's anybody listening. Visual fields, the visual universe does not exist until there is a creature who can actually see it. And this is so profoundly important. And I'll make one other final point about visual systems before we move on to the role of these entities. People believe that what they see with their mind's eye is what's out there. And now a moment's reflection can tell you that this is not the case. What happens is these photons, these weird little objects I was talking about before, they bounce off objects and they enter your eye. They enter your eye and then they hit the retina on the back of your eye. Now, the retina is postage stamp sized and the image on the retina is inverted. It's postage stamp sized and inverted. The information on the retina, the photon information on the retina, is then converted into an electrical signal. So it's changed. And that is then sent down the neurons of the brain, down the optical nerve and down to the visual cortex, which is at the back of the head and the darkest part of the brain. Something then reprocesses that information and presents it to whatever consciousness is in the brain. And consciousness then perceives that postage stamp image, which is inverted, into the three-dimensional, surrounding you completely visual field that you're now looking out of in front of your eyes. We know it's an hallucination. We know it's created by the brain for one very good reason. And I would suggest any of the listeners out there, and Michael, you can try this, close one eye. Okay, you've now closed one eye. You should have a blind spot. There should be part of your visual field that is not there. You cannot see part of it. The reason being, at the back of your eye, the optic nerve leaves the back of the eye. So there are no photosensitive cells at the back of the eye there. But your brain literally edits that out. You never see it. It edits it out by creating information from the information around it. Now, if it does it for that, it is quite reasonable to conclude it will do it for everything you perceive. So if you're then perceiving things that your brain wants you to perceive, it suggests that the brain acts as an attenuator. It doesn't give you all the information. And these entities, I believe, exist in the liminal areas at the edges of our perceptions. And it's only under certain circumstances that these entities can be seen. And this is when certain circumstances where people have take hallucinatory substances such as dimethyltryptamine, or they're in electromagnetic fields, something of that nature. And that's why things like ghosts people sometimes see and sometimes don't. It's all to do, and it's all the same phenomenon, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so sometimes a table is not just a table.
Correct. And again, sort of visual, if you read any book on visual systems and perception studies, it will tell you this as a point here, and this is a very important point. The people who consider that there is a one-to-one relationship between what we see and what is out there, there's a technical term for it. The psychologists call them naive realists. That's literally the term that is used for people that believe that what is out there is what is really there.
So what would be their role? If I can get you into that.
It's intriguing. I mean, I'm working with the group of people I know that are doing a series of experiments at the moment at one of the top London universities, Imperial College. And what they're doing there is, under controlled conditions, they're having people who are being injected with dimethyltryptamine, the strongest hallucinogenic substance known to man. And what they're doing is they're going into these altered states of consciousness and they're reporting back what they see. Most people who take dimethyltryptamine get what they are called the machine elves. Terence McKenna was a researcher that talked about this. And they see elves, they see creatures. Now, what is strange about these creatures is they are independent of the people who are experiencing them. And one of my associates who is involved in this told me a tale comparatively recently where he said he went into this altered state of consciousness and there was an entity and it came over to him and it told him that he shouldn't be doing it that way. It was the wrong way to communicate with them. He then comes to, and a week later, he then takes DMT again, goes into supposedly this dream state, goes into the dream state, and exactly the same creature came over to him and said, I told you last time, this is not the way you do it. This means that these entities have motivations, they're observing us, and they're independent of us in some way, but in other ways they are not. And I think it is all to do with what I call the egregorial model. Egregores are thought forms that can be created by people thinking intensely about particular things. An example of an egregore is probably when you're playing with a Ouija board, whereby something seems to manifest which is greater than the people playing with the Ouija board. You also get things called tulpas, which are thought forms that can be created and can have eventually become independent of you. And there's been experiments done over the years with the creation of these entities in one way or another. And indeed, a group of friends, myself and two associates, are going to be working on a controlled experiment to see if we can create egregores or get a group of other people to create egregores and see if other people can sense them, other mediums can sense them. It's very exciting times at the moment.
So could the fact that they're observing us be, in fact, creating us?
Yes, it could be a double feedback mechanism. I know this sounds strange, but the fact that they are observing us and we are observing them seems to be almost a symbiotic relationship, whereby the true nature of reality is far more complex than our minds can probably conceive of at the moment, because the universe is an incredibly mysterious place. You know, any scientists that turn around and say that we understand it are suffering from hubris. They're not. We know that 94% of the universe is missing. It's dark matter. 94% of the universe is dark matter and dark energy. They're called dark matter and dark energy because nobody actually knows what they are. Doesn't mean that because they're dark. It just means that we don't know what they are. We know it's there because we know that the galaxies revolve in a particular way. And if the matter that was in the galaxy, the observed galaxies, was just what we could see and measure, the galaxies would revolve in a very different way. The galaxies revolve in a way that only 6% of that galaxy are we seeing. 94% of it we don't. Which also means that if that is the case with galaxies, it's perfectly reasonable to say it's the same with the Earth. So 94% of the Earth we cannot see, we cannot measure, but it is there. This again, where I think these entities, where the egregorials exist and come through into this reality. We are but a tiny part of a much greater, wider planet Earth, for want of a better term. And these, I think, is where these entities come from and where they come into. But in the final analysis, everything in its base state is information. Everything is digital information. All we do is our brains process and turn digital information into visual images in exactly the same way as a digital television turns digital signals into a digital image that you see on your screen. In fact, even more as an analogy, if you if you have a virtual reality headset, you can actually exist in a three-dimensional world that you can walk around in using a virtual reality headset that is created out of nothing but digital information, zeros and ones, and yet you would believe you were in a cave. I don't know if anybody's ever been used the virtual reality Google Earth, where you can put on a headset and you can go onto Google Earth and you're in virtual reality. You are flying over the surface of the planet. It is as if you were in a three-dimensional recreation of the planet. You can fly down Manhattan between the skyscrapers and they're all around you. But it's not real. It's all digital information. And that's exactly the same as the external reality that we see. Everything is digital.
So in your opinion, can thoughts create reality?
Yes, thoughts do create reality. Reality is created by thoughts or information. Everything is created by the observer, by the sentient consciousness that is collapsing the wave function around us. Everything is thought. Sir Julian Jaynes, who was a very famous British physicist in the 1920s, towards the end of his life turned around and said, I believe that the universe is not a great machine, it's a great thought. Erwin Schrödinger, in his book What is Life, towards the end of his life, made exactly the same conclusions. Wolfgang Pauli, the quantum physicist, also came to the same conclusions. The idea is at its base level, it is consciousness that is creating everything. Now, the question is, well, how do we define consciousness? And I'd argue that consciousness is everything. Consciousness, we exist in a field of consciousness, just like there are radio waves that you attune with a radio. And it is consciousness that develops everything, consciousness that creates everything. Matter is created from consciousness, not the other way around. You know, scientists will argue that your brain, in some magical way that science doesn't even begin to understand, it seems to be that a reaction of chemicals with electrical signals in your brain and electrical waves seems to create consciousness, creates Michael, creates Anthony. That's nonsense. What is happening is the consciousness itself is what is creating everything that we see and perceive, in my opinion.
Yeah. So you also say that there's evidence that we can go somewhere outside of our bodies, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because if we move away from the idea that somehow we are trapped in our meat machines, there's suddenly a realization that consciousness is not located in the brain. The only reason we believe consciousness is located in the brain, well, there are two reasons. The first one is just by location. The idea is you're looking out of your eyes now and you're listening to things through your ears. If your eyes were located on your kneecap and your ears were either side of your kneecap, you would have the feeling that you were located at a point of space in your kneecap. But our sight and our ears are at the highest part of our bodies for obvious reasons, and that's how we perceive where we are. Now, of course, scientists and materials reductionist scientists will say, no, that is nonsense, because we know that we can measure brain activity, and we know when certain things are felt or thought, the brain reacts. And we know that certain neurons fire when certain people think of certain things. For instance, somebody will think of playing tennis and certain neurons will fire because of that. This is confusing the map with the territory. You can take the back off an old valve radio and you will see the lights going on and off as the radio waves hit the antennae and are processed into sound. But the studio is not in those valves. But they confuse the two. They see, because they see lights going on and off in the brain, or they see brain activity. Therefore, there is a one-to-one relationship between that brain activity and the consciousness that is perceiving it. It could just as easily be something that's processing it from somewhere else. Now, if we then move away from that, we can then start to explain such phenomenon as out-of-the-body experiences, near-death experiences, and lucid dreaming, which I've written extensively about and interviewed many people from around the world who experience these things. I know of people who have been in out-of-body experiences who have perceived information that they couldn't have possibly known and have brought it back. I know of other people that have been in out-of-body experiences where they have met other people, and them and those other people have reported back and they've agreed with the information they saw. But even more importantly, there's a person I know called Graham Nichols, who's an out-of-body trainer, who in 1999 had an out-of-the-body experience where he saw the future. And in this out-of-body experience, he saw a bombing taking place in Soho in London. There was a gay pub was bombed with a nail bomb. He saw that 5 days before the event took place in an out-of-body experience. When he came back from the out-of-body experience, this is 5 days before the event took place, he told 5 people who witnessed it and signed affidavits to say that Graham said there was going to be a terrorist attack in Soho in a pub. 5 days later, the Admiral Duncan pub in Soho, in exactly the location Graham said it would be, was blown up. Now that, to me, is irrefutable evidence. You can only come to 2 conclusions on that. Graham is lying, and all the people are lying around him. They're just lying for some reason, which is possible. Or it was a coincidence. Now, I would argue there are coincidences and coincidences. If somebody turns around and says, in the next year there's going to be a plane crash somewhere on the planet, and it happens, that's a coincidence. If somebody says there's going to be a bomb in a pub in Old Compton Street in Soho soon, and then 5 days later there is a bomb in a specific location, in a specific type of location and a specific hostelry, I think that is proof. And I think anybody that tries to deny that is deluded. I'd then finally like to give an example, and guys, you can do this now. Mark my words, this will astonish you. Do a search online for an album by a band called Coup, C-O-U-P, Coup. It's called Party Music. Go onto Google, find the image of the album cover. Look at that album cover, and you and I and everybody who looks at it knows exactly what it shows. It shows 9/11. It shows the Twin Towers being hit. It shows them in flames, both of them. That album cover was designed in May 2001. It had already been printed. It was in the record shops when 9/11 took place. In fact, they pulled the album cover and changed it because people were so astonished. Now, that album cover is so accurate, it's uncanny. On my Facebook site, I've superimposed one of the stills from one of the films taken at 9/11, the day it took place. And I've superimposed that against the image on the album cover. It is exactly the same, even to where the flames are coming out the buildings.
So the brain is a type of antenna.
If you like, it is a receiver. And the receiver model of the brain has been around for at least 120, 130 years, from people like Henri Bergson, a French philosopher, to people like C.D. Broad. Various writers, various scientists, various psychologists have argued that this is the case. And just a moment's reflection starts to make you believe that this possibly could be it, because there are certain mysteries about the brain that are not understood. For instance, there's something called a binding problem in the brain. Neurologists do not understand why we have a feeling of simultaneity, how it is that if I see a red bouncing ball going down the street, how I see that, because different parts of my brain are processing the color red, different parts of my brain are processing the movement and various other things. And yet I have a feeling that this is happening now. But the bits of the brain have to communicate in each other to create that image. And that would take time, because brain signals are quite slow in terms of how the signals are transferred across the brain. It's impossible. So they don't know how it works. But then again, they don't know how consciousness is created in the brain either. They haven't got a clue. 1999, a philosopher called David Chalmers at the University of Arizona stood up and said there are two problems. There's the soft problem of science, which is how the brain works in terms of its chemical constituents. But there's the hard problem, how these chemicals create consciousness, self-referential consciousness, how it creates your memories. You know, for instance, they've never found the location of memories in the brain. They've no idea where memories are in the brain. They know that the amygdala processes them, but they don't know where they're actually located. People can have brain damage in certain parts of their brain and their memories still continue. And yet other parts of the brain can be damaged and their memory suddenly doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work. It doesn't mean the memories aren't gone. It just means that the brain, like a computer, in terms of computer memory, it cannot access the memories.
Well,
Clearly, there's something magical about the brain we still don't understand.
I mean, they're saying that it's possible that consciousness has nothing to do with the brain. I heard you talking about the worm study.
Oh, that's right. Yes. A guy called Tam Shomrit. There is a type of worm that you can cut its head off and it will still survive and it will grow a new head. Extraordinary, but this is one of the things it will do. And these particular breed of worms, they know like liver. Okay, they know they like liver for some reason, so they will always move towards liver. If there's liver around, they will move towards it. However, also they hate bright light. So what the scientists did was they placed some liver underneath a bright light. And over a period of time, the worms were able to overcome their fear of bright light. They were trained to overcome their fear of bright light and go underneath and eat the liver. What they then did was they took the worms that had learned this and they cut their heads off, completely cleared out their brains, so there should have been no memories whatsoever. They then grow a new head and a new brain. The animals that did that, or the worms that did that, as soon as the new brain was grown, went straight through to the light to eat the liver. In other words, they remembered that liver was there and that bright light wasn't a problem. How? If the brain is where All this exists. How did that happen? Not only that, there was a guy called John Lorber, who was a British neurosurgeon in the 1960s, I think it was. And John Lorber, one of his patients, was an incredibly intelligent guy. He had a first-class honours degree in maths. He died, and they did an autopsy on him. He had no brain. All that he had was the edges of the brain, the surface of the brain around the edges of his skull. But there was nothing except that inside his skull. How on earth did he get a first-class honours degree in maths if he didn't have a brain? Indeed, how could he see anything? How could he smell anything? How could he walk? But he could. This is evidence, and there's something called black swans or white crows. In other words, science advances by the exceptions. If you have a theory and then one case disproves that theory about something, it means your theory is incorrect. That one case of John Lorber and the case of the worm should be sufficient for science to say our model cannot work. If one person can live their life without a brain, there is something strange about the brain. Now, if the brain is a receiver and it can receive in certain ways information, maybe it doesn't need the brain in the way we think it does.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, right? Now, I want to try to get you on to the whole, this is a simulation aspect of it, because we're kind of running out of time.
Okay.
I want you to try to explain to people about how you think that this is all a simulation. Is that what you still think?
Okay, right. The most important thing here is to probably avoid using the word simulation, because the word simulation suggests that it's a simulation of something else. You know, the word simulacra or simulation is a copy of something else. It's not a copy of anything. It is what it is. Okay. Now, the reason that many scientists are coming to conclude that this is a simulation is very well, it's not simple, but it's important to appreciate. And it is to do with two things. It's to do with the second law of thermodynamics. And the second law of thermodynamics states that energy can only be changed from one thing to another. The amount of energy in the universe can never be lost or gained. You can never lose energy or gain energy. You can change energy into a different form of energy. Heat can be turned into light, for example. But the amount of energy in any enclosed system will always be the same. Okay? Now, it has recently been discovered that information has physicality. Information has energy inside it. Okay? This is known fact. This is some of the research that's been done. So this means that if you went to a black hole and stood outside a black hole and threw your laptop into a black hole, the information of that laptop would be lost to the universe. And of course, the universe arguably is an enclosed system. The sense of that there's nothing outside of the universe is everything. So in which case, some information has been lost. Now, this contravenes one of the most basic laws of physics. It cannot happen. So what actually takes place when a whole planet is sucked into a black hole, or a spaceship is sucked into a black hole? Stephen Hawking concluded that the answer is that the information is somehow copied, and there is a facsimile of the information that has been lost, which is smeared along the edge of the black hole, the event horizon of the black hole. This information, not only, but all information is smeared in this way. And without going into the technical detail, but it's important to understand, imagine there's the concept of the Big Bang, and the idea is that the whole universe came from a point particle. Again, like the subatomic particles we were talking about, came from a point particle about 13.8 billion years ago, when something happened that wasn't big and it wasn't a bang, but something happened. And space and time suddenly expanded out from this nothing point. Now, again, this is, any logic tells you this doesn't make sense, but this is the modern belief. This expanded out. Now, you can imagine it's like blowing up a balloon, and a balloon expands outwards, which means that it's like we are on the inside of a huge sphere. And the universe is expanding outwards into what the universe is expanding into is an ongoing mystery. But everything there is expanding outwards. Now, imagine we are at a point inside the balloon, and the edge of the universe is the inside surface of the balloon. There's an argument that they're saying that there are tiny little points all over the edge of the inner surface. And these are little objects that are Planck squares. Now, the Planck length is the smallest possible piece of space you can have. And a Planck square is literally just 4 of those as a little square. Now, this is where it gets weird. Somebody has calculated how much data, how much bits of information you would need in order to encode the present visible universe. Then they've calculated the number of Planck squares that would be on the edge of this inflated balloon. It's the same number. That is a huge coincidence, and it's led them to believe that this is a hologram, that the true nature of reality is not solid, it's holographic in nature. Now, again, this is not just me talking about this. There was an article, there's articles after articles in scientific magazines. You get them all the time. Every time I buy Scientific American or I buy a copy of New Scientist over here in the UK, they are talking about this. It's just that the general public don't know about it. Okay? There is a research group at the Perimeter Institute in Canada, in Ontario, under the leadership of a guy called Craig Hogan. They are looking for the digitization of space. They are looking for the digital bits, and they're starting to discover them. Okay, this is of profound importance. This is why Elon Musk a few years ago turned around and said it is highly likely that this is a simulation, that this is we are existing in, for want of a better term, a computer program, a holographic computer program. Now, this means that what we think is 3-dimensional space is in fact 2 dimensions that has been expanded outwards. Again, if anybody's interested out there, and you should be, read up the writings of 3 people. Juan Maldacana, who is, I think, Brazilian. There's the late but incredibly talented Israeli quantum physicist called Jacob Bekenstein, who was one of the world's leading quantum physicists, and Craig Hogan himself. Okay? These guys, and Lee Smolin, there's various other people as well. Now, all these guys, particularly the guys that have been involved in the science of black holes, these are the guys that are suggesting this is it. It's actually part of black hole theory. Now, this is astounding stuff, because suddenly it means that the physical world we see outside of us is not what it seems. And I know I'm going to sound vain here, but I think I am the only writer on the planet that's making the links between consciousness, how consciousness processes information, to how it is that the quantum physicists are doing one thing and the cosmologists are doing other things. The quantum physicists aren't talking to the cosmologists aren't talking to the neurologist, and the neurologist and all the other scientists are most definitely not talking to the people who have out-of-the-body experiences, near-death experiences with dimethyltryptamine. Because they're not, because they don't want to get involved in it. They have to, because the evidence is there, and all they need to do is join the dots. And sometimes I feel like I'm somebody banging on a window saying, for God's sake, listen to what I'm writing about. Please stop ignoring me. At least be in a position to say that what I'm saying is incorrect. They don't engage with me. For some reason, they don't engage.
I wonder why.
Well, it's because there's a degree of, I don't know, arrogance about science. Scientists usually train and get their PhDs and do postdoctoral research in a very precise area. They don't look at anything outside that precise area. I call it silo science. And they're all like that. And they build up careers based upon the things they build. But they don't want to know anything else. They don't want to be cross-fertilized or discuss. And it means that all that happens is that you need an outsider who's not constrained by the rules and regulations of being an academic. I'm not constrained by academic restrictions, by the money I can get for my research projects. I'm literally free to go and say, well, that looks interesting, and read that academic paper. And believe me, Michael, everything I've spoken about today comes from academic papers. You know, I'm not saying this because I'm talking to dead beings from the planet Tharg. It's not because I'm channeling information. It's not because some 7,000-year-old Lemurian is talking to me or the spirits talk to me. Nothing of that. I am referring, if you read my books, every single thing I say is referred back to its source material. Every single thing. And I say to my readers, you go back to the source papers and you come to your own conclusions as well. And if I've made the wrong conclusions, that's fine. I don't mind. It's not as if I'm trying to prove anything. I just want answers. And this is why, in many ways, a lot of the scientists are very, very worried about, well, most of them just ignore me. Most of them don't even bother reading anything I write because I'm in the wrong sections in bookcases and in bookshops. So they're not even picking my books up. But the scientists that do, regularly more and more scientists are coming to me now. And they're saying, my God, I hadn't realized what your angle is here. I've got a university at the moment. I mean, I already have a degree and postgraduate qualifications, but there's a university at the moment working with me. They want me to do my PhD and my doctorate by publication because they think my work is worth an official qualification and a doctorate in the subject. And this is because what I'm saying has rational, logical sense. And in time, when I'm long gone, I am sure that somebody will come along after I'm dead. I mean, I'm in my mid-60s, approaching my late 60s now. You know, I haven't got much longer here. There will be somebody in 10 or 15 years' time will pick up my books, and my books are in universities, by the way. I mean, copies of my books are at the Harvard University have got copies of my books now. Princeton has got copies of my books. Berkeley have got copies of my books. Oxford University have got copies of my books. But they're not reading them in the right way. They're there in the libraries, but nobody's picking them up. But one day somebody will. And when they do, it'll be, shoot, this guy really did have it. Well, that's what I'd like to believe. Of course, I could be delusional. I could be crazy. I could be just a typical outsider that just believes I've pulled the things together. And we know that throughout history, there's been a lot of them. Who knows? Maybe I am just mad.
So are you familiar with quantum gravity research?
Yes, I am.
They postulate that the world is pixelated bit of information.
Correct, and it's the GO 6000 machine in Darsheim, I think, in Germany, was one of the first machines that picked up the pixelation. And I know that Craig Hogan has written about this particular machine. I think it's the 6000 machine. It's somewhere in southern Germany anyway. And they're picking up the pixelation. You're quite correct. And they weren't looking for the pixelation. They were looking for quantum gravity. But there seems to be a linkage between quantum gravity and the pixelation of space, because of course quantum gravity is also something that is integral if we're going to be unifying, because in physics, for instance, the great problem of physics, and again, physicists don't talk about this, the problem is we have two completely different conflicting schools of science. We have quantum physics, which deals with the very small, and we have cosmology that deals with the very big. Both of them have their own mathematical structures, and they both have their own formulae to explain how reality works. The problem is the maths that works with one does not work with the other. They are in parallel lines, and the whole point of quantum gravity is to try and unify these two conflicting areas. Because clearly you cannot have two explanators of reality, both of whom seem to be correct, but both of whom are wrong in relation to each other. Just as the problem is with quantum physics itself. At what point does quantum madness and statistical waves turn into Newtonian sense? You know, how large does a molecule need to be before it has wave-particle duality? The latest research I've shown, the last time I researched it, there were molecules like buckyballs. A buckyball is a spherical molecule that has 60 molecules in it, 60 atoms in it, I should say. They show wave-particle duality. Going back to my point I was saying earlier on, the objects, when they are not observed, are a wave, but when they are measured or observed, they become a particle. We're talking about big molecules here. We're talking about molecules that are coming to the size of viruses. Now, that's really creepy. And they've still yet to get to the level where this weird wave particle duality stops. The argument is it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. It's there all the time. And this is, again, some of the conflicting areas. We have the many worlds interpretation of particle physics, that there are billions of universes, and we are just one of the universes. We have the model, the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum physics, that consciousness and the act of observation collapse the wave function. We have David Bohm's implicate and explicate orders model to explain reality. We have Einstein's model, which is related to David Bohm's model. We have the Hawking-Hartle model called the top-down hypothesis of quantum physics. We have Kramer's model of quantum physics, the transactional model of quantum physics. All of these support my hypothesis, all of them. Even though they seem to conflict with each other, each one of these I can apply to my hypothesis and use them as evidence for my hypothesis.
So black holes create new dimensions, you think? I know you were talking about black holes earlier. I just wanted to go back to that real quick.
Black holes are curious things. There is an argument to say that things that are sucked into a black hole will eventually come out through a wormhole into becoming a white hole, which means wormholes can be used as tunnels into alternate universes. Now, if this is the case, it gets very intriguing, because recent research has suggested that there are micro black holes that are not much bigger than subatomic particles. Now, if there are these micro black holes, it means that your brain is full of these micro black holes. And if your brain is full of these micro black holes, it means that your brain can attune into alternate realities. Now, there are two researchers, and again, if anybody's interested, read up their research. There's a guy called Roger Penrose, who's the Rouse Ball Professor of Mathematics at Cambridge University, emeritus professor, I guess he's retired now, and a guy called Professor Stuart Hamerhoff, who's Professor of Anesthesiology at the University of Arizona. These two guys have come together with a model of consciousness which they call Orchestrated Objective Reduction, or ORC-OR. They suggest that within the brain structures of the human brain, and within each neuron, are tiny little structures called microtubules. These are the structures that hold together, and they're like the scaffolding of each neuron. Okay, these things are so small that they believe that they can be affected by subatomic particles. Now, subatomic particles can choose to be in existence or not, which means that a subatomic particle that's teetering on existing or not can affect what these microtubules do. Now, they also know, and this is extraordinary, that these microtubules also give off light. They give off single photons of light, biophotons. Not only that, but they fire these off inside themselves to cause what's called interference patterns. And billions of these microtubules are creating billions of interference patterns. Okay, what is a big example of an interference pattern? A hologram. So in which case, within our own brains, we are creating holograms. So the holograms that are being created by the brain are then expanded outwards, which gives us the external reality we think is external to ourselves. Finally, these subatomic particles also seem to react to something called the zero-point field. The zero-point field is, again, information and energy that seems to be coming from somewhere else, from alternate realities. Zero-point energy is supposed to be an energy that fills the vacuum of space, and it comes in from nowhere. There are subatomic particles at the moment they know of called virtual particles that come out of nowhere, exist for a trillionth of a second, and disappear again. They don't know where they come from or where they go back to. This is, again, known science. Now, the zero-point field and zero-point energy could be what dark energy is. And in which case it means that your brain, or the microtubules in your brain, processes that information to create and reprocess the signal of the brain, what we were talking about before, being a signal processor. Again, the evidence is there. It's just nobody's joining the bloody dots.
So do you think that black holes are holograms as well? Like the whole universe is a hologram, or
Oh,
just or
the
just
whole universe is a hologram, and if the question is, well, this is what the science is suggesting, and of course, if the whole universe is a hologram, then the black holes themselves must be holographic in nature. But they show certain things they do seem to suggest there's a holographic nature to them. But because, of course, all a black hole is something that has its matter has collapsed to such an extent that the escape velocity is greater than the speed of light. For example, the escape velocity on the planet Earth, because you know how mass works, is, you know, we've recently discovered the Higgs boson, which is supposedly the thing that gives objects mass, but we can't go into the science of that now because we haven't got time. But a black hole is simply, imagine the Earth, and the reason we have gravitational pull on the Earth is because its mass is greater, is very, very great, and the Higgs field pulls us down into the mass of the Earth. If the Earth gets smaller, but its mass remains the same, its gravitational pull gets greater. As it gets smaller, the gravitational pull gets greater and greater. So imagine a star like the Sun that is also shrunk down to such an extent that it becomes no larger than, say, a planet. That's a neutron star. It means that everything is so collapsed on it that even the atoms have collapsed into themselves. Okay? The gravitational field of that is really, really powerful. But light can escape because, as I said before, the light speed is 186,000 miles per second. So light can escape. Because, of course, spaceships and rockets need to travel at more than 24,000 miles per hour in order to escape the gravitational pull of Earth. The gravitational pull of a neutron star means that the rockets would need to travel at a ridiculous speed, but not the speed of light. Now, what is important here, and this is of profound importance, is that gravitational fields also change the speed of time. So, for instance, time on the Sun is different to time on the Earth. And if anybody's watched the film Interstellar, there is one sequence in Interstellar where they're on the surface of this planet, and because the gravitational force is so strong, their time is completely different. They're down there for years and years and years, which is the opposite for a few minutes. But the guys in the spaceship hovering around the planet, it's been years and years, been 60 or 70 years. We're on the planet is about 10. This happens now. This is known science. This is relativity. So at the edge of a black hole is a star that has shrunk into itself to such an extent that the escape velocity is greater than the speed of light, which means even light cannot escape. And that's why it's a black hole. So the light cannot escape. But it also means that time for a black hole is completely and utterly different. It exists in a different place in time and space because it's collapsed onto itself. And what it does, it sucks everything into it because the gravitational force is so strong that anything that comes anywhere near it gets sucked into it. But if there are mini black holes, it means they could be everywhere. And they think that, again, Bose-Einstein condensates, which are these are little units of energy that seem to carry quantum physics to much larger levels. A laser, for instance, is a Bose-Einstein condensate. Now, these things are incredibly weird as well, and they think there's a link between Bose-Einstein condensates, black holes, energy, time and space, and it's all incredibly interesting. And it's telling us something, it's just we're ignoring it. It's powerful. It is incredibly, incredibly powerful. I feel sometimes that I've got all these pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and they're on the table, and I've got all the pieces. All I need is to put them together.
Do you think we can escape? The
argument is escape this.
Yeah, escape the hologram, so to speak.
Well, there is an argument to say that death is when you escape the hologram. The idea that when you die, properly die, not die as in you die in space and time, because consciousness is non-physical, because of course it is, and consciousness is not made of anything. All of the things I've discussed now, consciousness is not made of any of them. Conscious is non-physical. Consciousness has no extension in space. It has no extension in time. You can't weigh consciousness. You can't take consciousness out of the brain. Well, you can take, because consciousness is everywhere. So in which case, when we die, do we go back into the field? Do we go back into the field of consciousness, where either we can be reborn as somebody else, which could be reincarnation, or as my own model, cheating the ferryman hypothesis goes, you can be reborn as yourself and you live your own life again and again and again. But you can change that life, as we touched upon before we started the interview properly. There are myriads of ways out of this. And maybe this is it. We live our lives over and over again until we get to the point where we live the perfect life, and then we move on to something else. What that something else is, who knows? Possibly it is what the mystics say, it's going back into the totality, which is everything. The moving back into what the Kabbalists would call the Or Ein Sof, the thing that is everything. The idea that at the point of reality, we are one single consciousness experiencing itself subjectively, and that consciousness is the universe. That consciousness is what we would call God, what we would call something, the greater consciousness of everything.
All right. Anthony, I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Can you tell everybody where to find you?
No, absolutely. If you're interested in my work, I'm on Facebook, very, very active on Facebook. If you're interested in checking me out on Instagram, I'm on Instagram as Ferryman54, and that's getting more and more popular there. Please follow me on Facebook. All my books have their own Facebook pages. If you're interested in my books, just take yourself into your local bookshop. You can order them in any bookshops in the USA, Canada, the UK, and in Europe. Also, my books are on Amazon. You can buy my books on Kindle. You can buy my books as Audible audio books. You can check my work and buy my books off my website if you want, and I can send you signed copies, which is anthonypeake.com. If you want more information about me and my work, literally just Google me. Just go onto YouTube, put in Anthony Peake. There are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of interviews, lectures, talks on there. There is enough to keep you going for a number of lifetimes if you're interested to pursue my work. But please join in on Facebook and join me on Instagram. We've got an international community that's getting bigger and bigger by the day. People are joining day on day. There are scores of people joining me. There are scores of people messaging me. This is a word of mouth movement. Get involved. If you're interested in any of this stuff, but you are interested in actual science rather than new age waffle, this is where you should be. Thank you.
All right. And everybody, the links to everything Anthony Peake will be down in the description, and we'll be right back right after this. And welcome back to Conflict Radio. We're just going to go ahead and wrap it up. I just want everybody to know that you can still find us on all the normal podcatchers. Make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go ahead and like this video if you're listening to this there. You can also check out our new website, conflictradio.net. I've been working really hard on that, getting that set up. There's a lot to see there. There's going to be a lot more probably after the weekend. So make sure you get over there and take a look at that. Anyway, that should do it for us for the week. We'll be back on Tuesday with another great show. Until then, be safe.